you so much for being a part of the NCSP Annual Summit today. I will warn you now, as we're getting started, there are going to be quite a few references to today being Valentine's Day today. But in all seriousness, it is really an honor to get to spend a part of Valentine's Day or any day working alongside such a phenomenal community. And there is no one we'd rather work towards an ambitious vision to drive meaningful benefits to all households through community solar than you all. So thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anna Balzer, and I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the National Community Solar Partnership. And I have the distinct honor of welcoming you to the 4th Annual NCSP Summit. If you've been coming to our summits for a few years, you know we always do things a little differently each year. But before we get into what's new this year, we have a few logistics to cover. So if we can move to the next slide, we'll jump in on those. First, please know that this event is being recorded. We will make the recording and the slide deck available publicly following the event. Second, we can go to the next slide. You have a number of different ways to engage in today's event through the Zoom feature. You can listen in through your computer or phone audio and can even focus some of the content by changing your view to speaker view. We are also going to be using the Q&A feature to collect questions for our speakers and panelists throughout the full event today. So you can add questions to the Q&A box and even upvote other participants' questions to help us prioritize the topics for our speakers. We're also going to be using the chat feature throughout the day, and you are encouraged to use the chat feature to introduce yourself and engage with other participants throughout the event. But we do ask that you please avoid any self-promotion, off-topic, and of course, any disrespectful messages. Anyone that is making the chat an unsafe or unproductive space may be removed from our meeting today. So you can go to our agenda slide next. We have an efficient few hours ahead of us. They are packed with an incredible lineup of speakers and panelists, but rest assured we have made time for Q&A in each of the sessions today. And of course, we have been in this relationship with the NCSP community long enough to know that a chat and some Q&A time is not sufficient for the level of deep and thoughtful relationship building that this community likes to do. So we have also designed a few other ways for you to connect with speakers and with each other today. You can go to the next slide. First, from 3:15 to 4 o'clock Eastern time today, many of our speakers, plus a few additional guests of honor, are going to make themselves available for deeper dive conversations in 4 breakout rooms using this very same Zoom link. They'll be organized by these 4 topics. These breakout room spaces are meant to imitate that time at an in-person event after a panel wraps up where you have the chance to catch a speaker to ask more specific questions or have conversations with other attendees on a specific topic. So thus, these spaces will be relatively informal and networking focused, and we hope that you'll stick around to join one or more of these conversations starting at 3:15. Go to the next slide. So second, we know that while great conversations can start in a Zoom chat during a virtual event, those chats disappear at the end of the event. So we encourage everyone to join a brand new space that we've created just for this summit, the NCSP Annual Summit Online Networking Community, where you can start deeper conversations, message other participants directly, and continue building both your conversations and your network during the event and even after the event is over. We will drop a link to join that community in the chat now and encourage you to head over. I am now excited to officially kick off our event content by passing things off to Nicole Steele. Nicole is the program manager for the Workforce and Equitable Access team at the Solar Energy Technologies Office and the head of the National Community Solar Partnership Program. She has spent most of her career in the equitable solar industry, and it is under her thoughtful leadership that many of the programs, including the National Community Solar Partnership, have taken shape. Nicole, I'll pass to you.
Thank you, Anna. Really appreciate that introduction and really appreciate you engaging all of our participants here today. I am thrilled to learn that we have over 1,000 individuals registered to participate in our day today. So, and really what that means to me, and I think means to the larger team, is how much excitement there is behind the community solar space and really the potential that community solar can provide across the country and really provide those benefits to folks that live in households or or operate in businesses that just can't host solar on their roof, but really want to make sure that they can fully realize the benefits of clean energy and specifically solar. And so I have the opportunity today to really tee up the next couple speakers, but then I will be joining you again afterwards to really dive into what they have to say for you in the next couple minutes. And so very excited to hear what announcements are going to be made. But before I do that, I get to send out lots of love. So I can't do this alone. You can't do this alone. It really does take a village to run the National Community Solar Partnership and deploy community solar across the United States with meaningful benefits. And that is why you all are here today. And I want to really shout out the full workforce and equitable access team that I lead here at the Department of Energy, and those specifically working on the National Community Solar Partnership. They work tirelessly day in and day out to really ensure that folks have the resources and tools and data and analysis to really make sure that community solar is truly accessible. And so not only is it the team here at the Department of Energy, but our team at the National Renewable Energy Lab and the team at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and our project partners that support our individual initiatives, everyone from the University of New Hampshire, Carsey School of Impact Finance, to NASIO, to the Clean Energy States Alliance, to the National Consumer Law Center, and there's many, many more. I know I've missed lots of folks, but I want to make sure that everyone on the call today really does understand that it really does take a village for us to be successful. And so with that said, I also want to really highlight the fact that NCSP has continued to grow over the years, and we are at nearly 2,000 NCSP partners today. And that is, you know, not everybody on this call. And so I really encourage folks who are on the call today to join the National Community Solar Partnership if you are not already members. And you will get to hear all day today about the resources and the conversations and the other partners that are involved with NCSP. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to our Associate Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Alejandro Morena, who is in the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy here in the Department of Energy. So with that, take it away, Alejandro.
Thanks, Nicole. Hopefully you all can see me. And thanks to everybody for being here, and welcome to the 4th Annual National Community Solar Partnership Summit. Also, happy Valentine's Day. We think you will be absolutely smitten with our fantastic lineup of speakers, sessions, and announcements in store today. This year's theme about deploying benefits and delivering impact really captures very well the vital role of community solar in our current and future clean energy landscape. And since the beginning of this administration, we've had a national goal, as you probably know, of a clean energy economy with net zero emissions by 2050. And during that time, the Department of Energy, under the leadership of Secretary Granholm, has been moving full steam ahead to implement the largest investment in climate action in U.S. history. Thanks to the passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act, we are modernizing the U.S. energy system, and we're creating a more secure and resilient energy future for all of us. These efforts are spurring innovation, they're boosting domestic manufacturing, they're strengthening our supply chain, they're developing the clean energy workforce needed to meet the demands of the future, and they're creating good-paying jobs across the entire country. And most importantly of all, we're making clean energy more accessible, more equitable, and more affordable for all Americans. And it's clear that to benefit all Americans, to benefit all of us, these national investments must focus on energy justice and equity. And we're committed to that outcome for all of the funding and for all of our programs and for all of our standards. Our job is to improve people's lives by ensuring everyone has the services they want with the infrastructure they need at the price that they can afford. And all of this highlights the value and the importance of community solar specifically, because it will equitably and expediently expand access to clean energy across America. Community solar can provide meaningful and equitable benefits to households and communities through savings, through consumer protections, through resilience and grid benefits, community-led economic development, and through workforce development. And the National Community Solar Partnership in particular, and the work that all of our members are doing, isn't only providing a vital service to our country, but it also really demonstrates the power of collaboration. This collaborative, action-oriented coalition, it spans the full ecosystem of players in the community solar space. And just, if you're wondering, just look at who's here online today. And it's really enabling the coordination that we need to rapidly identify and to share best practices to meet our deployment goals in a way that ensures that everyone benefits. And we're in an exciting place right now where this partnership has informed some groundbreaking new efforts and research. So let's kick this year's summit off with some exciting news. First, I am pleased to announce a groundbreaking new effort called the Least Cost Optimal Distribution Grid Expansion Model. Luckily, you don't have to say that 5 times fast. You can just call it the Lodge model. And you'll hear more about this in the next session, but this tool was developed by the National Community Solar Partnership in partnership with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And it identifies the most cost-effective ways community solar can be sited on the grid, with a focus on minimizing interconnection costs and maximizing distributed resource deployment. And if adopted widely, the model has the potential to encourage more streamlined interconnection and community solar deployment. I'm also pleased to share a new publication from the National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL, on the technical potential and meaningful benefits of community solar. The report is titled very literally, The Technical Potential and Meaningful Benefits of Community Solar in the United States, and it will be published today. And as a spoiler alert, the report estimates that community solar could serve more than 53 million households and over 300,000 businesses in the US that today cannot access rooftop solar. 53 million households. That is an inspiring target to aim for. And last but certainly not least, we're really excited to share some updates on our efforts to ensure that those households receive all the benefits possible from that expansion of community solar. And you'll hear more about this from Nicole in just a few minutes, but I'm excited to be the first to share that we have selected the 5 organizations who will lead the Equitable Solar Communities of Practice with EnergyWorks. Pending negotiation and final acceptance, these organizations will each receive $75,000 to convene members of the solar community to identify pathways to scale the 5 meaningful benefits of equitable solar. So, congratulations to Solar United Neighbors, who are selected to lead the Equitable Access and Consumer Protections Community of Practice, the Clean Energy States Alliance, who are selected to lead the Meaningful Household Savings Community of Practice, the Clean Energy Group, who are selected to lead the Resilience, Storage, and Grid Benefits Community of Practice, Cooperative Energy Futures, who are selected to lead the Community-Led Economic Development Community of Practice, and the Midwest Renewable Energy Association, who are selected to lead the Solar Workforce Community of Practice. Thank you to all of you for your commitment to a clean energy future that provides meaningful benefits to all. And again, thank you to everybody online so much for being here today. We know that by working together, we can make solar available to those who currently don't have access to it. It's not just about power, it's about lifting our neighbors, building stronger communities, and creating a more secure, resilient energy future for our nation. Most importantly, community solar is how we can work together today to deliver on America's promise that everyone will benefit from our national clean energy economy. So thank you again for being here. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Jeff Marudian, who will deliver some pre-recorded remarks. Thank you.
Hello all, happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for swiping right on solar and joining us at this year's National Community Solar Partnership Summit. We're happy you're here and we hope you're ready for some Valentine's Day puns. As many of you know, we at NCSP have a real affection for community solar and a big goal to reach, which is powering 5 million households with community solar by 2025, and thus creating $1 billion in sweet energy savings for subscribers. This means we need to spread the love by tripling the amount of community solar by the end of next year. We announced this ambitious target in 2021, in line with the Biden-Harris administration's goal of achieving 100% clean electricity by 2035, and doing so in an equitable way. There's the power of love, and then there's the power of community solar, which is one of the best tools we have to provide affordable solar energy to all American households, regardless of whether they own a home or have a roof suitable for solar panels. But as of today, we only have approximately 7 gigawatts of community solar capacity in the United States, enough to power the equivalent of 1.7 million homes. This is an amazing achievement, but we still have a ways to go. To achieve our goal of 5 million households and 20 gigawatts by next year, we need your commitment. So I'm here today to challenge you to hit this goal. Why not take the next step? We already have so much electricity together. Don't we owe it to ourselves and to each other to shoot Cupid's arrow and pave the way for our clean energy future? And thanks to President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act and Solar for All programs, we know this goal is achievable. There are at least 2.2 gigawatts of low-income community solar projects already in the pipeline, along with over 80 projects in our Community Power Accelerator. We're going to help you get it done. We want to make community solar accessible and affordable for every U.S. household and enable communities to realize the meaningful benefits and value of community solar installations. So I encourage you to go on a date with NCSP and take advantage of the resources that the partnership provides in helping us hit this target. There are over 1,800 members participating in the National Community Solar Partnership. Hundreds of them are here with us today, ready to make a match. So, regardless of your energy status, NCSP is ready for a bright future together. And it has all the qualities for a supportive, long-term solar relationship. So what's not to love about NCSP's dating profile and making a commitment to meet this goal? Don't be a heartbreaker. Let's finish what we started, meet our goal, and spend a lifetime with community solar.
All right, fantastic. I hope you all enjoyed our Valentine's Day puns. I am not going to be able to equally follow that up, but I will say that a total eclipse of the sun will only disrupt 4 minutes of solar generation or energy generation through community solar this coming April. But a total eclipse of the heart means that all of you who are on the call today become NCSP members. So that's my attempt to really incorporate the Valentine's Day theme here. And so really, again, shouting out to everyone who's participating, both as speakers and as NCSP members. So both Jeff and Alejandro talked about the National Community Solar Partnership and the goal or target, I should say, that was announced in October of 2021 by Secretary Granholm. And really the idea of this target is to set a gold star for the community, the entire community solar ecosystem to work towards. This is not a status quo target. This is if we work really hard and break down barriers, this is what community solar could do. We know it's audacious, but we also know it's doable, which is why we're calling on this community today to triple the amount of community solar that's deployed in the United States from today through 2025. And really what that means is that that could be supporting 5 million households with $1 billion in energy savings over the next 2 years. So really, we were at 3 gigawatts in 2021. We're already at 7 gigawatts today. And because of everything we're going to talk about today, we really truly think that this goal is doable. And so with everyone who's on this call and everyone who is in the community, we will surely meet that goal. So let's go to the next slide. I want to make sure that we're calling attention to something that we incubate it here in the National Community Solar Partnership called the Meaningful Benefits of Solar. And so while it, as part of NCSP, it's specific to community solar, it really is broadly the benefits of solar. And those 5 benefits include that equitable access and consumer protections, meaningful household savings, or really a focus on energy burden reduction, resiliency, community-led economic development or wealth building, and solar workforce development training. And so Alejandro announced winners earlier today that will be leading efforts in this, and I'll even dive into that a little bit more. But you know, this really truly acts as the lens of all of the work that we do here in the National Community Solar Partnership in making sure that, you know, not only is community solar accessible to every household who wants it, they truly get to see the benefits of that deployment. And it's not, it doesn't matter what the business model is. What we really care about is what it does. So let's go to the next slide. And the other thing that I will just note is that those meaningful benefits are directly tied to the Justice 40 initiative to really ensure that a minimum of our 40% of our work is really directed towards low income and disadvantaged communities. And so we set this audacious target of 5 million households, $1 billion in savings, 20 gigawatts of community solar by 2025. And we're not just going to put you out there and say, good luck. We spent an incredible amount of time doing stakeholder engagement, and we continue to do an incredible amount of stakeholder engagement to understand what the challenges and barriers are to deploying community solar, and particularly community solar with these meaningful benefits. And so we designed this pathway to success. And so those of you who've been around for a while have seen this time and time again. But for those of you who are new, really want to point out that, you know, we are here at the Department of Energy and at the National Labs and all of our project partners to really break down those barriers and really make sure that we are paving the way to that goal. And so it really includes direct technical assistance, free on-demand direct technical assistance. It includes engaging states, state energy offices, and other programs across the states, including LIHEAP offices, to really ensure that the framework and the markets across this country are really supporting deployment of community solar. We've really drilled down into access to capital, as well as consumer acquisition or customer engagement. And then the education and outreach component is so critical to our success. So let's go to the next slide. I know you guys are anxious to get to our conversations later today. So I really want to take a couple minutes to talk about what has happened over the past year. We hosted our NCSP Summit out in San Diego almost exactly a year ago, and so much has happened. And so since then, the Low Income Community Bonus Credit Program opened, and I think most folks on this call are very aware of the oversubscriptions to that program, which means there's incredible excitement to utilize that program. There is the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund Solar for All program. That's $7 billion going towards programs across the country to really ensure that low-income and disadvantaged communities have access to the benefits of solar. But then also on top of that is the National Clean Investment Fund and the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator that is providing that direct capital needed for more solar deployment and community solar deployment. We also want to highlight the fact that so many states are moving forward with either making their programs permanent or including low-income carve-outs for their programs. So like in Minnesota and then Maryland and New Jersey, really making their programs permanent, with so many other states doing incredible work and expanding community solar access. And then the other thing that I just want to highlight is because we incubated these meaningful benefits, that lens I talked about earlier in the National Community Solar Partnership, we're seeing it adopted across these things that I listed. So you will see the meaningful benefits referenced in the tax credit program, the 48 Little E tax credit program. You'll also notice that the meaningful benefits are a core component to the EPA's Solar for All program. And so we are really thinking about a whole of government approach to community solar deployment. And we want to make sure that we continue to coordinate and integrate our efforts. And, now all of this stuff is moving forward. And so we have so much to look forward to over the next year. So let's go to the next slide. I don't know why we're scribbling on the slides, but maybe we can get rid of that. So again, since this time last year, specifically in the National Community Solar Partnership, we did an incredible amount of work around the Community Power Accelerator platform. So if you were at our summit last year, you know that we launched the Community Power Accelerator. And just today, we launched a refresh to that online platform. So do check it out. I think we're going to drop some links in the chat for you to check out the Community Power Accelerator. For those of you who don't know what the Community Power Accelerator is, we have a panel on it later today, but really this is that answering that access to capital question and really connecting community solar developers who want to develop with meaningful benefits to the financing and pre-development capital that they need in order to be successful. And so we announced 24 partners a year ago. Today, we have over 100 projects on the platform with over 100 megawatts of community solar on the platform. We launched the Learning Lab as part of the accelerator ecosystem, and now we've seen over 100 participants in that Learning Lab. And also we were able to announce 2 rounds of the Community Power Accelerator Prize Challenge, which has already seen 50 winning teams with over $3.7 million in prize funding going towards those teams to support community solar deployment with meaningful benefits. So let's go to the next slide, and I can talk about a few more things before I hand it over to our panels. I really want to highlight the fact that last year we also announced the Low Income Clean Energy Connector, and this project is to connect recipients of LIHEAP funds, so those folks who are struggling the most to pay their utility bills, their electric utility bills, specifically for community solar. We've been building a tool for those LIHEAP administrators to use in coordination with their community solar program at the state level to directly connect those interested subscribers to available community solar subscriptions. And we've been testing a beta version of that tool in 3 states this year, and stay tuned to some announcements that will be coming shortly through the National Community Solar Partnership. And then last but not least, this time last year, we announced the first round of the Sunny Award winners, and we were able to do a round 2 this past fall. And as part of that, we also launched the Meaningful Benefits Best Practice Guide, which we'll also link in the chat. And then we held a series of Building with Benefits webinar series that were recorded, and so we will certainly share those links with you as well. I actually found those conversations to be incredibly insightful and really incorporated those teams who won and really helping spread the message on like how they actually made this work and how to integrate meaningful benefits into deployment. And so we've done a million other things over the past year, but just wanted to highlight a few major aspects. Let's go to the next slide. And so I think you all heard earlier that Alejandro announced the winners of our Equitable Solar Communities of Practice. And so these are the 5 areas of the meaningful benefits. And really what the idea here is to have a stakeholder-led process. It's not exclusively DOE or the national labs running this process. It really was a competitive opportunity for stakeholders who are leading the charge already, and an opportunity for us to support those external stakeholders financially and operationally, and really lift up their voices and ensure that that they will be sustainable in the long run. And so these communities of practices are for community solar, but it is also broader to include rooftop and storage as well. And so, but really, again, with the lens of the meaningful benefits. And so this project will be roughly 6 months, and it'll run into the fall. And everyone on this call will have opportunities to participate in these communities of practice, because there will be public convenings to participate in around the summertime. So again, I want to go to the next slide and just highlight again those winners, because it's just such an important element to the program, and these individual organizations will be leading these efforts. And so we want to make sure that everyone here knows about it, and we're celebrating the work that they've already done and what they will continue to do in this space. So again, Solar United Neighbors will be leading the equitable access and consumer protections pillar. The Clean Energy States Alliance will be leading meaningful household savings. The Clean Energy Group will be leading the resilient storage and grid benefits pillar. Cooperative Energy Futures is leading the community-led economic development conversations, and then the Midwest Renewable Energy Association will be leading the equitable workforce development. I know my time is limited, so let's go to the next slide. And last but not least, we have an open request for information, really supporting successful solar plus storage deployment with that lens of serving low-income and disadvantaged communities. And so we really are seeking feedback from everyone on this call. Those responses are due on February 23rd. So I highly encourage anyone who has opinions and have done work in this space to please engage and submit comments for that information, because that will really be shaping the work that we are doing. As we've said in the past, we are listening, and really this is another opportunity for us to really hear from you, our stakeholders, the NCSP community at large, on how we can continue to solve problems, break down barriers, and lift up opportunities. So with that, let's go to the next slide. Quickly, we have a bunch of exciting conversations that are going to happen, really focused on exploring the full potential of those meaningful benefits and reducing barriers to connecting to the grid. But also, it's such an important topic of improving consumer protections and the consumer experience. Everybody's favorite topic of maximizing federal incentives and investments. And then last but not least, leveraging philanthropic and private sector capital. So I hope you are as excited as I am to dive into these conversations, and then take advantage of the opportunities to network and have deeper conversations and breakout sessions later on today. So with that, let's go to the next slide so I can hand it over to the first panel. And I get to hand it over to Anya Pawlowski, who's on the Workforce and Equitable Access team here at the Department of Energy. So Anya, so excited to hand this over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for that wonderful call to action. I'm excited to welcome you all to our first session of the day, Achieving Scale Community Solar's Potential. Now, we have about 30 minutes for this session, including about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end, so it'll be tight. And as a result, we encourage everyone to attend our 3:15 to 4 p.m. deep dive session on these topics to ask more questions. As for the session today, we have researchers from our national labs presenting on the novel work they've done related to community solar and distributed generation. I'd like to first introduce Katie Wachter, who is a geospatial data scientist working at the National Renewable Energy Lab. She holds a Master's of Science in GIS from the University of Denver and today she'll be presenting on the novel research of community solar's technical potential in the United States. Now, this analysis shows us how we can scale community solar nationwide while hitting our NCSP targets. Whenever you're ready, Katie, please take it away.
Great. Thanks, Anya. Thanks, everybody. I am delighted to be here and to share with you the results of a national scale community solar technical potential analysis and the associated meaningful benefits. Before I get into it, I'd like to thank my colleagues for their contributions to the study and dedication, including Eric O'Shaughnessy, who headed up the meaningful benefits section, Sudha Kannan and Robin Burton from NREL. And I'd also like to thank the Workforce and Equitable Access team at CEDO and NCSP for their support. Next. So background on this study, we found from previous work at NREL that about 40% of homes and businesses in the United States faced significant barriers to behind the meter or on-site solar adoption. This study sought to answer the question if community solar could fill those gaps in access to solar energy for those who aren't able to access behind the meter solar. So we calculated both sides of the equation. How much electricity would we need to offset the electricity consumption of those that can't access behind the meter solar, and the technical potential of community solar in the United States? And we did this with as fine a spatial resolution as possible so we could learn about the local strategic siting and opportunities for community solar. So we found that the opportunity space for community solar to meet that unmet demand is not primarily constrained by the technical potential and limited developable areas, but by technological, market, and policy factors. As such, maximizing community solar's benefits for those unable to access behind the meter solar will require prioritizing key customer bases, whether it's low to moderate income households, disadvantaged communities, or energy communities. I want to highlight now that the report is available now, which hopefully will be shared in the chat for attendees to access. It's hot off the presses. Next. So in calculating electricity consumption unmet by behind the meter solar, we follow the same criteria as outlined below from the 2015 Shared Solar Market Potential Report in determining barriers to access for residential and commercial electricity customers. So it primarily surrounds tenure, building ownership, and insufficient space to host PV systems or PV systems of adequate size to meet 20% or more of electricity consumption on site. So based on 2020 electricity consumption data from the Energy Information Administration, this added up to be a combined 809 terawatt hours per year for the 50 states and the District of Columbia. So in addition to the criteria laid out here, I wanted to add that for residential buildings, we also included mobile dwellings. So that includes vans, RVs, mobile homes, and the like. And these criteria are not exhaustive of potential community solar subscribers. Next. Okay, so let's move into the supply side of the equation. Community solar is unique to other solar systems. It isn't one specific type of configuration of panels, on the ground or buildings with clear limits on system sizes, and one region, much less the country. At its core, community solar is defined by how it's used. Thus, our siting assumptions reflect flexibility in PV array type, system size, and interconnection requirements. So for this study, we included both rooftop and ground mount PV systems with a minimum size of 38 kilowatts DC with no upper limit. These community solar systems are intended to not overlap areas typical for single customer behind the meter PV systems or utility scale systems. So we should consider the numbers that we're talking about today to be additive to other types of PV deployment. Next. So our approach to community solar technical potential is a little bit different than other technical potential studies. So as a primer, technical potential refers to the maximum amount of energy that could be generated from a renewable energy resource given current technology and physical constraints, and it represents the upper limit of energy production without considering economic limitations. It's assessed based on resource availability, geographic characteristics, system performance, and land use constraints. So since community solar is specific to its use, we applied virtual hosting requirements, and these include interconnection types. So for rooftop systems, interconnection is assumed to be on the feeder. Ground mount systems, interconnection is assumed to be at the substation within specific 1 to 2 mile distance. Additionally, there's a distance to subscriber requirement, which follows a lot of common co-location requirements for community solar. Community solar systems and subscribers must be within the same electricity service territory. And finally, virtual hosting limits. So we balance the community solar supply to serviceable demand within utility service territory. And next, I also want to highlight here that the land use constraints we use are also specific to community solar. So we relied on 2 of NREL's existing ground mount PV siting regimes, the limited access and reference access, to exclude areas not feasible for community solar. So there's a lot more to this, and it is listed in our report. I'm also happy to follow up with questions during the technical potential and grid optimization deep dive. Next. Okay, so with balancing supply and demand constraints, this is a critical point for understanding our virtual hosting limits. So technical potential, total technical potential, estimates are based on technically potential supply in supply constrained areas and technically potential demand in demand constrained areas. This accounting maintains location fidelity while normalizing community solar within electricity markets. So another way to think of this is that not all communities have the developable space for community solar to offset the electricity consumption of those in their community that can't access behind the meter solar. Those communities we consider to be supply constrained. Other communities have much more developable space for community solar than they need to offset electricity consumption of those in their own community that can't access behind the meter solar. We consider these communities to be demand constrained, and community solar supply in those demand constrained communities was balanced to match serviceable demand for that service territory's market. Next. Okay, so the results are that we found that there's up to 967 gigawatts of potential community solar supply under the limited access siting regime, as well as 2,861 gigawatts of community solar potential under the reference access siting regime. 397 of those gigawatts are for rooftop solar alone, which is the same for both scenarios. And this represents more than 1,700 to 5,200 terawatt hours of annual energy production. And for Justice 40 communities, that's 167 to 468 gigawatts of community solar capacity hosted within these communities. Next. So what does this say about community solar's ability to offset electricity consumption? Well, these are very large numbers. Keep in mind that these estimates do not account for feasibility, cost, profitability, and regulatory limits of community solar deployment. Community solar has a potential to offset electricity consumption for households that cannot access behind the meter PV in aggregate, but not everywhere locally. So in aggregate, it would only take 69% of the community solar capacity under the limited access scenario to offset that consumption. And for and for reference access, that's 13%. But let's break it down more. There's sufficient potential to meet single-family residential buildings, multifamily residential buildings, mobile dwellings, and low to moderate income households consumption using 70% of the model community solar supply. More detail about income, tenure, and building types is available in the report as well. Next. So Whereas we have the aggregate technical potential of community solar to offset electricity consumption not met by behind the meter solar, community solar isn't available in the amount needed in every community. And that's what this map shows. We're looking here at the percent of unmet electricity consumption that can be offset by locally sited community solar. But don't panic, red is not bad. Red, orange, and yellow mean that additional community solar energy needs to come from outside that local community. And this is based on census tracts. So each polygon is about 4,000 people. Tracts represented as green and blue mean that additional community solar capacity can be found than is needed to meet local community needs alone. So these are the areas that can host additional community solar to boost solar accessibility in the communities that need it. Next. So for strategic siting, I have a few takeaways I want to share. One is that community solar follows a distinct urban-rural divide. The bulk of community solar capacity will likely come from ex-urban and rural areas, plus rooftops, especially in highly built-up areas or urban areas. Two, community solar is less affected by state and county ordinances and setbacks for ground mount PV than utility scale PV is. And that's a really significant finding and an important niche that community solar can utilize. The largest opportunity space for community solar is in siting smaller systems within infill spaces. So focusing on multiple uses for a space, underutilized or vacant lots near load centers, and marginal lands everywhere as possible, near interconnection points. And last, the bulk of the community solar systems we modeled, which directly reflect the physical spaces that are uniquely accessible to community solar, are under 5 and 10 megawatts. The right outliers, so the really large community solar systems that we modeled, are only in those rural areas. Next. For rooftop solar, regions with less land availability need to rely on rooftop PV more. And that includes regions with complex roof architectures that typically have less developable space per building. So that means smaller system sizes. So they'll need more buildings to reach that same capacity as regions with more large flat roofs. Next. One back. Thank you. And finally, on the siting side, some building types and occupancies are better suited for community solar hosting. So focus on industrial, wholesale trade, large, like 50+ unit multifamily buildings and schools. Additionally, buildings in the Southern Great Plains and the Midwestern states have the highest average available area for hosting rooftop community solar. Next. So we estimated meaningful benefits from these 5 different categories: equitable access and consumer protections, meaningful household savings, resilience, storage and grid benefits, community-led economic development, and solar workforce development. So in recognition that the technical potential estimates are not comparable to the market estimates and NCSP targets, we calculated 2 sets of meaningful benefits, one based on a 13 gigawatt increase of community solar installed from 2023 onward to reach the NCSP target of 20 gigawatts, and the other on the technical potential estimates, assuming that all technically potential community solar is developed. Next. Under the NCSP target, we estimate reaching up to 210 to 310,000 LMI subscribers. Community solar could potentially provide 100 to 330 million in annual household savings. It could also provide 30 to 100 million dollars annually in electricity backup, plus another 20 to 60 million annually in grid services, as well as 20 million to 160 million dollars annually in incremental economic benefits to hosting communities that stay in the community, and close to 300,000 jobs. Those benefits are going to be more realistic than the technical potential estimates, which are absolutely enormous. So I want to mention that NREL is hosting a webinar on February 28th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that will cover all of this in more detail, and we will share it to the NCSP networking group. Next. Oh, perfect. So we'll put the link for the webinar in the chat as well as the report, and hope to see you all in a few hours at the deep dive session. Thanks. Back to you, Anya.
Thank you, Katie, for that insightful research. For our next presentation, we have Miguel Heleno and JP Carvalho presenting from the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on the least cost optimal distribution grid expansion model, the Lodge model for short. Miguel and JP are both research scientists at the Berkeley Lab. Miguel holds a master's in electrical engineering and computer science and a PhD in sustainable energy systems from the University of Porto, MIT Portugal program, and JP holds a PhD and master's degree from UC Berkeley in the Energy and Resources Department. The Lodge model builds off the technical potential research we just heard from by showing us how we can unlock the cost-optimal benefits of siting community solar strategically on the distribution grid to deploy as much as possible. The Lodge model helps us understand how to minimize interconnection costs while maximizing community solar and storage deployment. The model can also be used for distributed generation resources broadly. When you're ready, JP and Miguel, please take it away.
Thanks, Anya. It's great to be here. And let me jump right into it. So see if we can recover some of our time. Next slide, please. So as Anya was saying, the key question here is related to the interconnection costs as part of the interconnection process for community solar. It is well known that the certainty of those costs is a key enabler of community solar deployment. So we sought to solve some of the, address some of the issues that we're seeing. For example, what are objectives, a way to quantify grid upgrades? What types of upgrades may be needed? What is the range of costs of these grid upgrades needed to interconnect community solar? And are there any deferral benefits or strategic siting benefits that may be unexplored, say non-wires alternatives? And so for this particular project, as Alejandro was saying in the introductory remarks, we developed a specific model that my colleague Miguel will expand on later on. I'm going to be focusing on my exposition mostly on results and some key policy insights. Next slide. So the value of this research is that this is the first analysis that has systematically studied the technical impacts of community solar projects on a wide range of feeders. And this allows us to have a much better perspective on what to expect upon trying to interconnect in different types of feeders across the country. As I mentioned, this work, for the purpose of this work, we developed the least cost optimal distribution grid expansion or Lodge model that Miguel will expand on later. This model is an objective tool that finds the least cost portfolio of traditional system upgrades and potentially can also combine it with alternative non-wire solutions in order to achieve minimal costs for the community solar developer to interconnect or look for strategies that may mitigate any costs. Next slide. Overall, one of our key results is that under our baseline conditions, most community solar projects that we analyze do not require any particular grid infrastructure investments to be integrated. Now, in particular, this is because of our key choice of sizing community solar projects using the minimum daytime load approach, which is an approach that is designed to essentially respect the hosting capacity of the feeder. If the feeders that we're analyzing were much more loaded, so in a scenario where the load levels are much higher, we actually find that in approximately 50% of the cases, community solar projects can lead to mitigation of upgrade costs. So should community solar not be developed, then the needed cost to accommodate that load growth will be higher than when community solar is integrated. And of course, the key question here is, what are regulatory methods to capture those benefits. We also find that if those same feeders had a scenario with high penetration of rooftop PV, then community solar projects actually require additional investments in about 30% of cases. And this makes sense. If there's already a crowded space in the middle of the day when PV injection is occurring, then community solar project value decreases a little bit. We also find that the large number of feeders with zero impact, as I mentioned, suggests that our sizing guidelines may be a little bit too conservative, and that ultimately it boils down that the optimal size of a community solar project for a feeder is on an ad hoc basis. So both the hosting capacity analysis provided by a local utility and the threshold value for the sizing of community solar might not be the right point. Next slide. So in terms of interconnection costs themselves, in the cases that we find, it's about 20% of the cases where there is an interconnection cost and they're positive, those average about $180,000. And it turns out that we found some data from Minnesota. This is very rarely publicly available, but Minnesota has in the Solar Gardens program, has a key distinction where the utility has to report deviations from their own assessments of earlier interconnection costs and actual interconnection costs. So we have access to empirical data. Turns out, as you see here towards the left, that the distributions of values are fairly similar, especially the median values are almost the same. Our methodology and our report has a much wider set of interconnection costs because we examine a much wider range of feeders, of around 3,000 feeders distributed in different parts of the country. But so this validates the fact that the large model is actually achieving, with the right calibration, is achieving very similar values to what a utility is reporting is the actual interconnection cost. Next slide. One key aspect that we analyze is the ability of potentially downsizing a community solar project. And so the large model allows us to understand the cases in which it is more cost effective not to upgrade the system, but to downsize a little bit the capacity of the community solar project to accommodate and mitigate costs. This is, in our case, only about 10% of cases. This makes sense. And in this space, in about 80% of these cases, the reductions are about a fifth of the original project's target capacity. The key implication here is how to achieve this right downsizing number and what are the incentives to do so. Next slide. So I'm going to provide a couple of policy and regulatory insights before passing it to Miguel for a more deeper explanation of the technical model. What we're finding is that the hosting capacity benchmark of minimum daytime load may be too conservative, and as I mentioned earlier, there is a need to go even beyond hosting capacity and into a much more interactive way to integrate community solar in utility distribution system planning, such that the community solar is an asset to the grid rather than just another project that needs to be interconnected and pay for certain amounts of upgrades. We're also finding that we're recommending that regulators could require utilities to identify feeders that could be candidates for no-wires alternatives, essentially signaling to community solar developers what feeders are more amenable to produce capacity deferrals, especially given certain load growth expectations. And so community solar developers can target these particular feeders with some sort of shared saving mechanism that could be developed such that they have the incentive to, the utility has incentive to capture some of those savings, and the community solar developer has a much more streamlined process to interconnect with very low or no interconnection costs related to system upgrades. We think that there could be much more accurate and rigorous capacity downsizing guidelines for community solar projects. And what we didn't inspect is what is the bottom line on the community solar side. In general, community solar projects try to be as large as possible within the existing thresholds, but there is a chance that the bottom line may improve with a guided downsizing process. And then finally, we believe that community solar developers could work to identify feeder locations with the utility. Next slide. I'm going to give it up to Miguel.
Thank you, JP. I will get just 2 minutes of your attention to go over a little bit of what we have done here in this study to capture those costs. So what we did was very simple. Was we calculate the costs of planning the distribution system with and without community solar. So this is a methodology based on the counterfactual. So we calculate the costs if community solar was not connected and compare it with the costs, the optimal costs, if community solar was connected to the system. And in both cases, what we do is we understand or try to get the least cost investments and in infrastructure that the utility would need to do to keep the grid safe. And for that, we use the Lodge model, and I'm going to ask the next slide. What the Lodge model does is exactly provide this optimal for a particular scenario of load and community solar or any sort of DER in the system. It selects the least cost portfolio of investments, and these are a combination of traditional investments such as reconductoring, as you see, for example, here in this green reconductor of the feeder, plus some non-wired alternatives, such for example the location of the grid connected storage. So this tool is very interesting because it allows us to assess costs in an optimal way and can be used in a number of studies, just even beyond community solar. So any sort of DERs, and help us understand how DERs can play together to reduce the cost of the system. So next slide, please. We are just, this is the last slide, mostly to learn more about next steps. So we are moving from looking at that data set of feeders that are prototypical and representative, and go actually to individual pilots and individual states. So we are currently working with Oregon PUC and to start a pilot where we can actually use real feeders in this study and capture costs that are particular to a state or a territory. We're gonna be learning, you can learn more about it and even express interest in getting one of those pilots in your state by assessing here to this QR code. There is a form that you can fill out if you are interested in getting Lodge and this sort of community solar interconnection cost analysis applied in your state or territory. We'll also be holding a webinar on the March 7th, 11 a.m. Eastern. So you can register. There's going to be a Zoom link as well. So stay tuned, and yeah, looking forward to the next conversations. Also looking forward for the discussion this afternoon.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Miguel and JP. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, we're going to skip over the Q&A portion and move to the next panel. However, any questions that were just asked, we've recorded for ourselves, and we can dive deeper into them at 3:15. So again, really encourage people to come. So just want to thank the panelists for all your hard work and really interesting presentations today. And now I'd like to pass it to our next session of the day. I'd like to pass it to Mayana Campbell. Mayana is a policy analyst at the Office of Energy Justice and Equity at the Department of Energy, and she'll be moderating this next panel today.
Thank you, Anya. I'm so sorry. Thank you. My name is Mayana Campbell, and I am absolutely delighted to be the moderator for today's panel and Q&A as we embark on the journey through the exciting world of consumer experience. In my role as a policy analyst at the Department of Energy, sitting specifically in the Office of Energy Justice and Equity, I've been privileged to immerse myself in the intricate dynamics of market participants, advocating for change, and ensuring inclusivity in our ever-evolving energy landscape. Before we dive into this discussion, I'd like to set the stage a bit informally, if I may. It's important for me to convey that I often lead this work with my heart. This work is personal to me. Consumer experience and consumer protections can seem broad, but it boils down to millions of individuals. In fact, today we heard that there's 1.7 million households attached to community solar projects today, and that we're targeting to hit 5 million this year alone. So this work isn't just about policies and regulations. It's deeply personal. It's about millions of individuals, their choices, and their communities. Today, we're here to think about how we engage with, protect, and uplift consumers. Our conversation will delve into 3 critical topics centering around consumer benefits, evolving best practices and consumer protections, and ensuring that we scale at the speed of trust. So without further ado, I invite our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves and share either a word or a small descriptor that they believe encapsulates why they are passionate about today's conversation. For example, the word that I would choose is empowerment. Now I'd love to hear from our panelists, and I will start with Fatima. Fatima, you're muted. I'm so sorry.
Hello, everyone. Hey, thanks, Miana. Great to be here. Thank you. This is, again, as you said, the stage of something very important to us in our organization. I'm Fatima Ghani here, working for Solar United Neighbors, SUN. SUN is a national nonprofit dedicated to representing the needs and interests of solar owners and clean energy supporters. So we strongly believe that an informed consumer is a smart consumer. So the greatest opportunity to build trust for community solar is to encourage best practices among all stakeholders and to educate the consumer. So that way, an informed consumer being a smart consumer to take choices which suit their needs in the best possible way. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. So I heard the word informed from you, and I'd love to dig into that a bit later. I'd love to turn it now to Amir.
Great. Thank you for having me. Amir Yazdi, Deputy General Counsel at SEIA, Solar Energy Industries Association. So for those of you who don't know, SEIA is the National Trade Association for the U.S. solar industry. So we represent everyone from installers, manufacturers, community solar providers, and really anyone else who touches the solar ecosystem. And if I had to summarize it, I think you stole my word, empowerment. So I think it's really a focus. I'll choose a second word, which is really a focus on community. And what do I mean by that? In order to build trust, build engagement, and make sure that we are scaling and meeting our goals, it means we need to be working with everyone in the community, whether it's educating the customers so that way they know what to look for, select the right product and service and provider for them, making sure that we're educating the industry, setting standards in place so that way they know how to properly engage customers and avoid misrepresentations, and also properly communicate the benefits of solar, working with government stakeholders so they understand what is going on in the marketplace, and if there are issues that need to be addressed, collaborating to make sure that we are, addressing them, and then working with what I would say broadly other stakeholders to understand what they're hearing and making sure that we are collaborating, making sure there's an information exchange, and so that way we can grow and strengthen all these programs, policies, and standards that we have, and build trust and hit that 5 million customer mark.
Thanks, Amir. And I would say doubling down on a singular word is always great. So I appreciate that. But I also enjoy that you mentioned community. I think that is why we're here today and the whole point of the conversation. Kelly, I'd love to turn it to you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Kelly Hedaya. I'm the Senior Director for Client Solutions Operations for Pivot Energy. Many of you may know Pivot, but we also have a subscriber organization branch called Sun Central. So I oversee all of the operations. So that's everything from subscriber acquisition all the way through retention and revenue collections. And looking at this from kind of a developer and a subscriber organization perspective, we really need to start focusing on designing products and experiences that are easier or create easier access to community solar and that are easier to understand. So, I guess if I'm highlighting a word, I would use education. We really need to better educate consumers and create, community solar almost as a household name in order to break down some of those barriers and helping people get signed up and save money. So I really like, actually, Amir, what you said too, along the community side, like if we're going to truly lean into what community solar is, we need to hold ourselves accountable and really think about the community that we're serving and ensure that we're able to reach more and more people with ease.
That's awesome, Kelly. I really appreciate that. And I love that you built a bit off of what Amir said. It shows how our industry can work together and really how we're connected to one another. Bernetta, last but not least.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bernita, and no worries, everybody gets it wrong, at least once or twice.
I knew I was going to do that, but it's okay if you get my name.
No worries. I'm Bernita Haynes, a senior attorney at National Consumer Law Center. National Consumer Law Center has been around since before I was born, since 1969, working for consumer justice and economic security for low income and other disadvantaged groups, including older adults, around the country, using our expertise in policy analysis and advocacy, publications, litigation, expert witness services, and so forth. And you can learn more at our website at nclc.org. At NCLC, my focus is on energy affordability as well as medical debt. Within the energy affordability space, I've covered a smorgasbord of information and things, including community solar access and how to establish important guardrails around it to ensure that we're protecting low-income consumers in particular. So I would say my word would be guardrails, particularly because it is so important that we establish really essential safeguards, consumer protections around community solar to ensure that it actually does benefit folks and that it makes the right first impression on communities.
Yeah, I'd love to anchor in that word in particular. It's kind of cheesy, but I think of consumer protections in general as kind of an umbrella, right? Protecting the consumers from the storm that's out there. So I really appreciated that particular word. And it kind of leans into that. The first question I have for everyone here in particular. So I talked a bit about, or I referenced to early on in this conversation that we're all having today, that there's about 1.7 million households that are attached to community solar projects today, with a target of 5 million by the end of the year. So that is some incredible growth. I can't do the math on that very quickly, but it's exponential. And I'm not sure what industry can match that on some level. But with this growth comes increased private investment. And I think there's an interesting dialogue surrounding the delicate balance between business objectives and the imperative in ensuring consumer benefits, and how you perceive the interplay between profit motives and social impact, and how we're really going into communities facing barriers and ensuring their voices are being heard. So I'd love to start the conversation centering around the consumer benefits. And Bernita, since you mentioned guardrails, I'm really curious what your kind of first impression is on that question.
Yeah, I'm sure happy to jump in here. I think it's important to emphasize that community solar isn't inherently protective of low-income folks. I think there's this belief that it's just automatically protective of folks compared to rooftop solar. But community solar needs intentional protections to ensure that the benefits, these savings and so forth, are maximized, and to make sure, as I said, that community solar has that right first impression to avoid some of the negative outcomes we've seen in the rooftop solar market, for instance. And I want to emphasize that low-income consumers and community members are often the targets of predatory sales and marketing. The question is often, why do we need these community solar consumer protections? And it is because there is this history for decades of low-income consumers being targets of predatory sales and marketing. To combat that repeated targeting of these communities, federal and state regulators have adopted many consumer protections, like the FTC's door-to-door sales rule and state unfair and deceptive practices laws around the country. Emerging energy technologies like solar and deceptive and abusive practices related to energy have led regulators to adopt new protections as well as these products come onto the market. So to reiterate, consumer protection should be implemented from the outset, from the start, to protect low-income families, in particular from financial harm, and to preserve the integrity of new community solar programs that'll serve these families. The question then always comes to, What are some examples of those protections? And I'll stop there in case maybe you want to turn it over to other folks to jump in on the first question.
Yeah, I'd actually love to turn it to Fatima to build on that. So as community solar protections are being considered or implemented in markets, I'm curious how your organization prioritizes community involvement and empowerment. I heard the word informed a lot when you introduced yourself. And so how are you kind of working in strategies to employ and foster authentic collaboration, empowering the consumer?
Yeah, so an informed consumer. So the way we are working around is we have developed an extensive community solar resource for consumer education. And as I said, an informed consumer being a smart one. So provide as much information right from when somebody is starting to look on for community solar, from as simple as what is community solar, because people come to us asking all the basics about community solar. So if somebody is landing in there for information, to right from very basics as to what is community solar, how does it work, what to consider when shopping for community solar. So starting from the basic questions there. And then looking onto the other side, where different stakeholders are involved in the process, right from industry to government to customers, then supporting projects that benefit the customer. Is it a good economic deal for the participants? How customer friendly is it? And then coming onto the community, does it benefit the community? And a very important part, which Pernita highlighted, and that's all around the work, is expanding solar access and ensuring and incentivizing low and moderate income participation.
I really appreciate that, trying to figure out what makes sense for that community and what benefit is that community anchored in. That's an incredible kind of callback to why we are doing this work and the point of community solar, or why it's titled community solar. To go back a bit, Amir, I'm curious, being kind of a broad industry representative on some level, community solar, it's not necessarily scalable in a sense from market to market in terms of consumer experience, consumer protections, how the programs are implemented. So I'm curious how you see the dynamics of that kind of profit motive, which is very important, and why people are incentivized to develop these projects, but also ensuring consumer benefits as well as kind of social equity through these projects.
Yeah, sure. And I think like a lot of like the lessons we've seen in the rooftop solar market translate very nicely into community solar, which is for community solar, or really any product to succeed, it depends on trust. It depends on making sure that customers believe that if they're signing up for this, they're getting fairly treated, they're enjoying the benefits that they come to expect. Those benefits are properly marketed. So whether it's a for-profit company, a nonprofit, government program, no matter who's marketing it, it's really critical that they are truthfully, accurately, and intentionally talking about solar. And I really like Bernita's comment about intentional consumer protections, because one of the issues that we've seen in some states is kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall at times. And really, we want to make sure that we are targeting what are the real questions customers have, what are the issues that they're worried about, what have been some of the lessons learned in other industries. So that way we are like addressing them up front, thinking about intentionally and in a targeted way. So that way those companies who are entering the marketplace know the rules of the road, may not be tempted, and some of those actors who might not be willing to cut corners are less tempted to, because there's decent rules in place, while the good actors are properly safeguarded. So that way, when they are going to these households talking about solar, the customer gets that accurate information, signs up, and is happy and continues spreading the good word. Because at the end of the day, if solar has a black eye, then we're not going to see support from government agencies, local communities, or other stakeholders that are going to really let us hit that 5 million mark. And that's, I think, a big part of what we're trying to do at SEIA, is make sure that we're succeeding, not in the short term, but over the next decade and beyond. So that way community solar becomes a common product for any household, not just something that was up and running for a few years and then got squashed because of, complaints.
I think that's a great place to kind of stop and reframe a little bit. So Kelly, I want to turn it to you as hopefully a good actor in the marketplace. And I'd love it if you could, in your opinion, define what you think a good actor is as a developer, as a subscription manager, interacting with consumers on a daily basis, and how you're thinking about intentional benefits with your projects.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle. Thank you for volunteering me for that. I think, this is something that we take pretty seriously, and it's partly because we're asset owners and developers, but also, like I said, we manage on behalf of other organizations as well. And so we've become sort of experts in this field in the way that we think about subscriber acquisition and management in terms of like how we communicate with subscribers. It's really important that we not only talk about the benefits, but again, doubling down on kind of my initial word of education, ensuring that people know what they've signed up for and they know what their rights are. So, with more programs coming online that have requirements for income verified or income qualified subscribers, the onus is really on the developer, which creates kind of an additional burden for people as they're developing projects to not only figure out how to create a product that is financially beneficial to the consumer and financially viable to the company, but then also adhere to and acknowledge all of the consumer protections that go along with that. And I think that's hard for smaller developers. And so, the way I think about a good actor, if you will, in the space is someone who has a level of expertise and knowledge in doing so, and is really looking to employ those best practices, not just the legal ones that are, we have to adhere to, but also how do we sell to customers? How do we make sure that they know they're being treated fairly? How do we also make sure that we're getting subscribers that really truly do understand? So, in addition to signing people up, we have a pretty robust onboarding process, and we do this for our own projects and the projects that we manage. And if people do not understand the product, or if they don't feel like they have enough benefit from it, they are able to then opt out and cancel at that time. I think, over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of shift from creditworthiness being deemed FICO score plus, payment on file plus, and all of these other things that are required. And we're able to say, okay, it's relatively easy to get or build a wait list and get some additional subscribers to replace that attrition rather than have subscribers that are unhappy. So, we make sure that people understand what their full rights are within their subscription agreements. In addition, if they do terminate, we give them whatever the time frame is, and any additional information that they might need. So if there's still bills to pay, why they would still need to pay them, and we walk them through that. I think there are other, good actors and players in the space where it's not unique to us, but I think that's what is really important, is that we band together and everybody's speaking the same language and using the same terminology to ensure that subscribers are well informed.
I love that you just kind of based it back to some of the things that we glaze over in community solar, like a contract, like understanding what you're signing up for, what this product is. We so often hear in the industry folks referring to it and trying to distill it into its simplest form as like a Netflix subscription, but it's not. I mean, it's easy to understand and chew on as another subscription in our lives, but there's a complicated contract and understanding of what you're signing up for behind it, and who you're picking to work with is really impactful to your experience. One of the things that I think we're all coming and basing our conversation back on is consumer protection. So energy as a sector, as we all know, is rife with consumer protection issues. And what's so exciting is everyone here, not only on the panel, but listening in on this panel, is being part of the change and working in this space with a commitment to doing better, learning from previous mistakes, and striving for continuous improvement. But just because policies are opening the door, as Bernetta said, it doesn't make the program or project itself inherently consumer friendly. So I'd love, Bernetta, if you could just take a second and respond to what Kelly was talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate, Kelly, you mentioning, how do we make sure we have an informed subscriber, and so forth. There are, some very specific protections that we recommend, such as, and in terms of a nutshell, states should be willing to set some strong financial and marketing requirements for community solar marketers or developers. Additionally, states should be setting oversight and compliance requirements for themselves, strong eligibility and enrollment requirements, and low-income program coordination requirements for community solar state administrators, right? So the kinds of policies that need to be implemented to really protect consumers really go along two lines: requirements for the marketers and developers themselves, but also requirements for the community solar state administrators. All this includes committing to standardization so that developers have sort of standardized forms and things like that, contracts that they can use, and committing to coordination with low-income programs. I want to be clear too, that I sometimes use the word marketers, and that broadly refers to developers, but anyone who is communicating with potential subscribers to community solar project, which can also mean subscription managers, utilities, and so forth. So what then are some of the specific protections that we would recommend and that we've seen in certain community solar programs around the country? Well, requiring marketers to ensure verifiable bill savings and state administrators to monitor and evaluate bill savings, requiring consolidated billing so that households have a clear sense of the costs and savings all laid out in one bill from their utility. Requiring marketers to use, as I mentioned, standardized plain language contracts and disclosure forms that are developed by state administrators. So not all that onus is on the marketers and developers to develop those forms. Requiring marketers to comply with states' codes of practice and/or consumer protection laws, especially related to door-to-door sales, where we've seen so much of fraudulent behavior and abuse. Very quickly, requiring state administrators to develop clear and accessible complaint systems for community solar participants, right? Requiring state administrators to develop income eligibility determination processes in coordination with low-income programs like LIHEAP and WAP that marketers have to adhere to. And then also requiring these state administrators to coordinate effectively with those kinds of low-income programs to ensure compatibility and that there's no negative or adverse impacts on other low-income benefits. And I think that gets to this need to further tie energy efficiency with solar to maximize the benefits as well. So coordinating with programs like LIHEAP and WAP will also feed two birds with one seed instead of kill two birds with one stone. But I just wanted to really sort of follow up on Kelly's comments, because there is a way to take some of the onus off of marketers and standardize it better so that there's a bit more of a ease of subscription for consumers, for community members, and a way to evaluate it and actually have a nice system in place that makes sense for everybody involved.
We are quickly coming up to time to move to Q&A, but that was such a kind of remarkable place to leave it that I want to give space to Fatima or Amir if you have any response to what Bernetta provided us.
Yeah, sure. So I would just add a couple, just echo a couple of things that Bernita mentioned, which were like, one, standardized disclosures. I think, contracts vary, company to company, and we're definitely pro-innovation. Companies are going to compete on various things, but we think a standardized disclosure has been very helpful to give a snapshot of the key terms that customers should be know about and do that apples to apples comparison. I think another thing I would just also raise is language accessibility, especially, households that may not be speaking English as a primary language, making sure that any consumer facing materials are available in those languages, industry or government is translating those. And then I think on the marketing side, again, like community solar is new, like companies are working through program specifics. And so having like clear guidelines as to what you can and can't say, I think is very, very, very helpful, and something that SIA has been working on for some time now. And then I think also like salesperson training is something critical. Like these are the first touch point in the customer journey. And so making sure that the salespeople know the product, the programs, the basics before they, go to that kitchen table is really critical, and something that we are continuing to work on. And then, one other thing I was just going to raise, I would call it like kind of consumer protection with a little c, which is also making sure when you're designing the program, making sure, like, for example, it's not so stringent that the customer is, for example, waiting months and months for a project to come online and stuck in limbo. So making sure there's flexibility that, if there's another project that's coming online nearby, that they can be sort of sent over to that project. So I think things like that, where you want to make sure that the program is not so, I would say, overly protective, that it reduces the flexibility and causes the customer to be unable to tap into those benefits sooner rather than later.
That's helpful, considering the barriers to entry. Fatima, I'm just curious if you have anything to add to that ahead of turning it over.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll echo with all my co-panelists here, whatever they say, and especially how Kelly wrapped up from the developer's perspective, Bernetta from the consumer protection, and Amir. One thing I want to go back to Bernetta's comment was complaints for consumers. I feel that is, some place wherein when somebody is stuck in a situation, a central place, where do they reach out to for any kind of protection or support? And also what Amir laid out are basically the guidelines and considerations we have been talking about since the beginning. So if this falls in place, things are standardized, it's very easy for a consumer to understand that perspective and make the decision that best suits them. Thank you.
That was a nice wraparound, and I really appreciate how everyone kind of built off each other. This is really showing how the industry needs to collaborate with one another and how important it is to hear the different perspectives of different groups. So turning it over to the Q&A, there was an interesting one that came up, and I think to go off of what you're saying, Fatima, of standardization, and same Amir, standardization across the market. There was a question that came in that asked if there's a different type of model for community solar. So it's interesting because we're calling for one in our conversation, but a question came in wondering if there's different efforts to create another model for community solar outside of just subscriptions. And where do you think kind of the pinnacle of a gold standard project is? Is it community solar subscriptions? Is it third-party owned, utility owned, or is there a different model that you think might be the ultimate goal?
Yeah, happy to take that. Because community solar varies by state and even by utility, it is important to know what to look for to make sure you get the best deal for you. So already different kinds of models are existing in the market. So I'm not sure if we need something new to come up, or I'll go back to from where we started, standardizing and committing to the best practices. So whatever is existing kind of makes the best for the market, for the consumer, for the developer, keeping in mind those ethics. And also what Kelly said, that apart from the legal part of it, the ethics part of it. So if we kind of concentrate on those two, then I hope, I'm sure we can work out the models which are existing in the market. I'll let Amir jump in if you have anything to add.
Yeah, no, and I think that's I think the big thing is like making sure that you have like a framework in place. I'm a big believer on a personal level, competition. And so companies are going to develop different market models, different subscription models, different ownership models. And so I believe like the best one is going to win out as long as everything is communicated, as long as customers know what to ask, as long as the salespeople are trained, et cetera, et cetera. But as far as like which model is the gold standard, I think it's really up to the marketplace to decide, as long as those intentional protections are in place.
Kelly, a question came in that maybe you'd be interested in. If not, feel free to say no. But Kelly, a question came in that asked about misalignment with customer expectations and what they actually see on their bills, potentially getting a second bill, or the discount isn't what they expected because they changed utility programs. And since you started the conversation focused on education and work in this arena, I'm curious what your response to that question would be.
Yeah, I mean, my short answer is everything is a work in progress still, right? So every time we think we have this nailed down and we really feel like we know how we're talking about community solar and that we're educating consumers wisely, we then realize that other questions come up that either we sort of anticipated or just really didn't know about, and particularly when we add new markets and new programs. So each program has its own set of rules and requirements, and it gets really tricky. It's not a one size fits all model from, Colorado to Maryland. It's and particularly in states that have multiple utilities as well. I think even touching on kind of the point before about, how do we think about creativity and innovation in the space? I think there's a lot of room for that, to think about how we create better products, particularly for the LMI market. That doesn't directly answer the question of like when there's confusion between 10% versus 10% discount on your bill credits, right? It's really cumbersome and really nuanced. And so to be able to explain that to people requires a lot more onboarding and education. And I think really where we should be focusing our efforts is thinking about, from a program administration side and a legislative side, what can we do to create better programs that support those communities, rather than it being up to the individual developers and asset owners to create models that maybe are slightly more innovative, but maybe less financially viable for the company in order to serve those communities. Really, we want it to be beneficial for asset owners and developers and the consumers. And it comes down to thinking about creativity. There's a lot of room for innovation in how we think about credit donation or bill assistance, in addition to other ways that we give back to the community. So Pivot actually gives a ton back to the community in terms of donations and scholarships, but we've also instituted some programs, particularly in Colorado, where we were able to fully donate credits to subscribers rather than asking them to pay a second bill, because we know that that's a burden that we are having a really hard time overcoming. And Amir, you mentioned this, right? It's not just about speaking to people in the way that they need to be spoken to and in the languages that they need to be spoken to, but then having a support system that can also back that up. And if we're expecting all developers and all managers or subscriber organizations to then have bilingual staff to be able to support this, I think that's just really not sustainable, and it certainly isn't scalable. And so it really comes down to pushing for more creativity and more widespread adoption of these different kinds of models within the industry for each segment. And that's true not just for LMI populations, but also, for, say, rural agricultural people that don't use their online billing system. They're literally paying bills with a check. And, how do we make sure that we're actually accessing all of the people that we want to with these programs?
I'm so appreciative, Kelly, that you brought in the LMI aspect. So as most of us know, a lot of the programs that are spinning out now are updating to more progressive models that include carve-outs for low income or low to moderate income households, which is incredible. Community solar is one way that we can offer savings and potentially donated energy savings to low income households. The last question I have is, I think kind of based on that, or grounded in that same topic, is what kind of follow-up do you see in the marketplace after a project has subscribed, his PTO is online? How much follow-up is there on, are these projects actually creating economic benefits for these, in particular, vulnerable households?
Yeah, I can kick that one off too. And then if anybody wants to add on to that, I think there's still room to improve there. I think that some of us are doing it really well, and others, I think there's a lot of greenwashing in the industry, right? And so I think we need to be clear about what it is that people are saving. Sometimes the savings or cost saving benefit is really small. And when you're talking about small savings and then the burden to pay a second bill, it's not worth it for people to subscribe in a lot of cases, or that's their mentality. And so we need to continue to educate past commercial operations to ensure that we're engaging our subscribers and also retaining them. As you know, the cost to reacquire and constantly keep that pipeline afloat is an additional cost that sometimes isn't baked into the model up front. We may have only adjusted for, say, subscription costs through a certain time frame. And when we're having to do reacquisition just based on natural attrition, that ends up getting costly and eats into companies' profits. And so, you know, if we're, again, trying to balance the side of profit for the asset developer and also the consumer, we need to really balance those things and pay attention to that. So, you know, I think anything that's done after commercial operations has to be a strong communication of like, here are the things that you're doing. You know, here are the ways that we're giving back to your community, you're contributing to your community. You know, I like to say that I think a big part of this is that we're creating more civically minded or civically engaged people by saying, here's how you are contributing, and here's the product you're enrolled in, and you're supporting the generation of clean renewable energy. And here's over the next 20 years, how we pivot, or, you know, any other developer that does this, how we pivot and you are working together to rebuild your community or to make your community better through whether it's donations, scholarships. You know, we've even built playgrounds for schools and things like that based on what's needed in those areas that we're going into. So it needs to be a constant communication. It can't be a set it and forget it. And we can't sign people up and just wash our hands of it. You know, we'll tank the industry if we stop communicating. So I think anything we can do to really increase those efforts. And like I said at the beginning, create community solar as a household name. You know, I'd love for Pivot Energy and Sun Central to be a household name, but I'll be happy if community solar itself is a household name.
Thank you, Kelly. That was a really insightful, I think, ending to our Q&A and a great call to action. So in conclusion, I'd love to just kind of sum up. Oh, are we in a breakout room? But in conclusion, I'd like to sum up what I heard today, that the market not only should provide clean energy access, but it should do it in a transparent, fair, and consumer-friendly manner. I'd love to thank our panelists for the insightful conversations today. Your insights were invaluable and have illuminated key aspects of the program. So I will turn it over to Vera Borgmeyer, who will be leading Building Your Capital Stock with Federal Incentives and Programs. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mayana. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on building your capital stack with federal incentives and programs. My name is Vera Borgmeyer. I am the Senior Project Director, or a Senior Project Director at the Clean Energy States Alliance, or CESA. We are a nonprofit coalition of state energy agencies working together to advance equitable clean energy policies and programs across the country. And I am delighted to be moderating this session today. We are in great company. Thank you to our speakers today. And of course, thank you to you, our audience, for showing up to learn from them. This is a really exciting time to be in the renewable energy industry. And well, we'll talk about some of the opportunities from IRA and BIL and potentially CHIPS even. I want to focus on the IRA for a little bit. So it includes far too many funding programs to go over in 40 minutes, but I want to pull a few out that are particularly relevant to community solar. And the first, obviously, is the tax credits. I'd say one of the most meaningful things that the IRA did is that it created a stable, predictable policy environment for solar, right? And something that's good for solar is good for community solar by extension. But starting with extending the investment tax credit and the production tax credit, the ITC and the PTC, and of course, making the PTC available for solar, which is very relevant if you're for your capital stack, if your project is in one of those high capacity factor states in the West or the South. But also, of course, it's it created those new bonus credit programs attached to the ITC for solar projects that meet specific goals, right? So a 48E program for low-income communities. You'll hear more about this today from Gabriela Rodriguez. She is a policy analyst with DOE's Office of Energy Justice and Equity. Beyond these bonus programs, the IRA also created new tools like transferability and direct pay or elective pay, which I'm sure you've heard about. People are very excited about those. Anisha Stephen, who is Senior Advisor to the Council on Racial Equity at the U.S. Department of the Treasury, will tell you more about it in a minute. And I'd be remiss to not mention the second largest pool of funding available to solar, even if we're not going to talk about it within this particular session, which is, of course, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, including the $7 billion Solar for All competition administered by EPA. So the awards decisions on this have not yet been made, as you know, but be on the lookout for an upcoming report from CISA in the next couple of weeks that will give you some insight into and some aggregated information, some aggregated data on solar for all programs proposed in 35 states. And I can tell you without spoiling any kind of big surprise that community solar programs will play a really big role in those state programs across the country and across the political spectrum, which is very, very exciting. So there are, of course, many more funding programs out there, and EPA, Treasury, and DOE, even though we love them, they're certainly not the only prospect that you should whisper sweet nothings to today on this Valentine's Day as you consider building your capital stack. The U.S. Department of Agriculture is also open to long-term relationships. Yes, I have to go with the corny jokes, I'm sorry, for funding opportunities. But before you make it official and commit to spending the rest of your asset life with only one agency, JoBeth DeLauder, who's acting climate advisor at USDA, and Ari Gerstmann, who is a state energy program manager at DOE's State and Community Energy Programs. We call it SCEP. It rolls off the tongue a lot better. Will help you and help us really understand how to approach stacking incentives and lovingly braiding programs together. So bad jokes aside, it's truly a historic moment for this industry, and I'm hoping a turning point for our climate and our communities. I'll warm up our experts with a question each while you sharpen your pencil and get your questions ready. Please drop them in the chat. And one caveat is that our speakers are all federal employees. Federal employees, contrary to popular belief, are not all tax attorneys, and they will not be able to answer questions that are too specific. So on this Valentine's Day, let's see if love is indeed spelled IRA. Anisha, I'll start with you. Many in the solar industry have been eagerly awaiting the finalized rules around the investment tax credits, direct pay, and transferability provisions that I just mentioned. Can you briefly describe what those provisions are about? What kind of organizations may be able to utilize them, and how does this work?
Sure. Thank you again so much for having me here and inviting me to speak. I'm going to address transferability and elective pay, but I thought I would also give a little bit of an overview of tax credits in general and the different bonuses because they intersect with each other. So as you all know, the Inflation Reduction Act is the most significant legislation to combat climate change in American history, but for Treasury, it's also one of the largest investments in the American economy in a generation. So we are really focused on delivering the tax incentives that were enabled by the IRA with equity and accessibility at the forefront. At Treasury, we have seen over and over again that economic policies that are designed to support those with the greatest need ultimately benefit everybody. So as we are putting together regulations for things like elective pay, transferability, the ITC, PTC, and others, we are considering how to make it accessible to as many projects and parts of the country as we can. So as Vero mentioned, we are discussing tax incentives today. These are, some of them are in proposed rules and not final rules. So please be aware that anything that I discussed today could be subject to change. And the best place to see any final iterations of guidance is irs.gov/clean energy. So as you know, the IRA includes tax incentives for a broad range of green activities, including energy generation, energy efficient buildings, et cetera. But it also includes features to expand the reach of these credits and the range of actors that can benefit them. So I'm going to start by doing a little quick overview of the cross-cutting provisions and bonuses. So it includes, the IRA includes a number of cross-cutting provisions and specifically 4 bonuses that can add value to some of the base credits like the ITC. The first is the Energy Communities Bonus, which drives investment to communities that were previously dependent on coal or fossil fuel for jobs. The Low-Income Communities Bonus Credit, which is one that I lead for Treasury and the IRS, which encourages investment in clean energy facilities in underinvested communities. There's a Domestic Content Bonus, which rewards new projects that take advantage of PTC or ITC credits using American manufactured or produced materials. And for the first time, we also have incentives to encourage prevailing wage and apprenticeships, so strong labor incentives in renewable energy products or projects. So underpinning all of those are 2 new credit monetization mechanisms. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions, I would say, when people ask me to talk about elective pay or transferability is this sort of spark that comes that like the IRS is going to be able to directly, pay for any activity that is going on with renewable energy. But you ultimately have to qualify, a project needs to qualify for a tax credit and could layer on some of those bonuses. But the actual value of that credit is now available in different mechanisms than we've ever seen before in the tax system. So again, for the rules on that, I would encourage you to go to irs.gov/cleanenergy. But for elective pay specifically, this is the first time that applicable entities like state, local, and tribal governments, tax exempt organizations, and some businesses, depending on the credit, can receive the value of like a dollar for dollar value of the credit directly paid from the IRS for the first time. So this applies to so not all of them, but definitely for the ITC. And under our proposed rules, the eligible entities right now are not-for-profits and other tax-exempt organizations, state and local governments like cities and counties, Indian tribal governments, U.S. territory governments and political subdivisions, agencies and instrumentalities of state, local, it's going to get wonky, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments. This includes things like water districts, school districts, economic development agencies, public universities, and hospital systems, things that are affiliated with a state, city, or local government. Alaska Native corporations, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and also rural electric cooperatives. So the flip side to elective pay or direct pay, as the public often calls it, is transferability. So there are a number of entities that were not included in the list that I just mentioned that can still utilize and monetize these credits in new ways than we've ever had before. Transferability allows entities that can't use elective pay, like for profits, to transfer all or a portion of the credit to a third-party buyer in exchange for cash. What is different between transferability and what we've typically seen in the renewable energy market around tax equity is just a simplification of the model. The buyer and the seller would, negotiate and agree to terms and pricing outside of the IRS or Treasury. That's a third-party transaction, but these credits are transferable really outside of these really complicated tax equity structures for the first time, which is really exciting. And we're hoping that through elective pay and transferability, we will see new types of entities enter the renewable energy space that have never been able to monetize their tax credits before. There are a lot of rules for all tax provisions. Taxes are really hard. I've worked in taxes my entire career. It's really hard. So please look at the IRS website. And if it still doesn't make a lot of sense, because even to me, sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense, please consult a tax advisor. It's the best thing you can do to really understand the regulations here, because no amount of explanation for many of us, even though we're all really smart and talented government officials, is going to be as valuable to projects as actual tax advice from a a tax attorney. I will throw it back over to you.
Yeah, words to live by, I think, as you think about building your capital stack. Thank you. One quick clarification before we move on. Can you clarify whether you can qualify for both direct pay and transferability, or is it one or the other?
It probably makes sense for it to be one or the other when you're thinking about the types of entities that qualify and the type of project you are doing. But again, these are in proposed rules. So when the final rules come out, there'll be more clarification on that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anisha. So Gabriella, Anisha mentioned 48E, 48 little e, excuse me. The little is important, 48 is something different. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works, how your office at DOE is supporting access to this credit? And I think there's been an announcement this week that maybe you can also talk about real quickly.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me. Just a quick intro. My name is Gabriella, and I'm a policy analyst under DOE's Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity. And I'll be sharing information today in my role at DOE as part of the team working to administer 48 little e on behalf of the IRS. So the Low-Income Communities Bonus Credit Program, which is the full name, also known as 48 little e, is under Section 48 little e of the Internal Revenue Code. And it provides a process for owners of qualified solar and wind facilities to apply for an allocation of capacity limitation, increasing the existing Section 48 energy investment credit by 10 or 20 percentage points for those qualified solar and wind facilities, which have to be under 5 megawatts AC. The program itself, it puts priority on three main goals. First, to increase the adoption of and access to renewable energy facilities in low income and other communities with environmental justice concerns. The second goal is to encourage new market participants. And the third goal is to provide social and economic benefits to individuals and communities that have been historically overburdened with pollution, adverse health effects, and marginalized from economic opportunities. So the DOE's Office of Energy, Justice, and Equity is administering the Low-Income Communities Bonus Credit Program in partnership with the Department of Treasury and the IRS. DOE will review applications and make recommendations to the IRS. And so for this program, the IRS will allocate up to 1.8 gigawatts of solar and wind direct current capacity limitation per year. This annual capacity limitation is divided across 4 different facility categories. Those 4 are 1, facilities that are located in a low income community, 2, facilities that are located on Indian land, 3, facilities that are part of qualified low income residential building projects, and 4, facilities that are part of a qualified low income economic benefit project. And so for the 2023 program year, which we are currently in, 50% of the total capacity in each of those program categories will be reserved for qualified facilities that meet certain additional selection criteria. And so facilities may qualify for that additional selection criteria based on ownership or geography. The ownership criteria, just for a little bit extra context, is based on characteristics of the applicant that owns the qualified facility. And a qualified facility would meet the ownership criteria if it's owned by a tribal enterprise, an Alaska Native corporation, renewable energy co-op, a qualified renewable energy company meeting certain characteristics, and a qualified tax-exempt entity. And then secondly, and very briefly, the geography criteria is based on the county or the census tract where the facility is located. And it's recommended to definitely refer to the final recommendation for the final regulations, for the qualifications that are needed to meet that criteria. And so with all of that said, and just the brief program overview, I'll wrap up with some program updates and where you can learn more and apply. The 2023 program year began in October of last year. And DOE will no longer accept applications for the 2023 program year for the program after February 29th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. Applications for the 2023 program year will continue to be accepted on a rolling basis until that point, only for applications that are submitted in categories with remaining capacity. you can access the applicant portal by heading to our DOE landing page, and I'll put the information in the chat on where that is for the program. On that landing page, you'll also find the IRS final regulations and additional program resources like an applicant checklist, an applicant user guide, and a frequently asked questions document. And then lastly, you can also view updates on available capacity by facility category on the program capacity dashboard, which can also be accessed through the applicant portal. So I'll go ahead and drop that information in the chat and pass it back to you, Vero.
Thank you so much. Jo Beth, let's move on to you as my next victim. So USDA, you're helping deploy IRA funds to rural and agricultural communities. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works and how you've seen USDA, particularly USDA's clean energy funds, stacked effectively with other federal and state incentives? So in the context of community solar, if possible.
Yes, thank you so much. Again, my name is Jo Beth DeLauder, and I am the acting climate advisor at the Rural Business Cooperative Service, which is a division of U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development. And we are very excited to be implementing programs through the Inflation Reduction Act. One of the programs that I have the pleasure of working with is the Rural Energy for America program, which is known as REAP. It delivers on the President's Justice 40 initiative, which aims to deliver 40% of the overall benefits of certain federal investments to disadvantaged communities that are marginalized by underinvestment and overburdened by pollution. These investments will cut energy costs for farmers and ag producers that can instead be used to create jobs and new revenue streams for people in their communities. Since the start of the Biden-Harris administration, USDA has invested more than $1.6 billion through REAP, with nearly 6,000 projects of renewable energy and energy efficiency improvements. We continue to accept REAP applications and will hold funding competitions quarterly through September 30th of this year, of 2024. The funding includes a dedicated portion for underutilized renewable energy technologies. So this program provides guaranteed loan financing and grant funding to agriculture producers and rural small businesses for, again, renewable energy systems or to make energy efficiency improvements. And of course, some of that involves solar arrays, and the available funding that we have, grants can cover up to 50% of total eligible project costs. Previously, before the IRA, it was up to 25%. So loan guarantees can be combined, can cover up to 75% of the total project cost. And the key for community solar is that applicants would work with utility, and the utility provider then works with subscribers to form small business cooperatives to make these solar installments. That's an option for community solar because there are repassed statutory provisions against residential subscribers, which I know can be an issue with community solar. But as far as stacking programs, federal programs, there are stipulations depending upon which programs you're trying to stack, and I would advise working with our state energy coordinators as well as our REAP technical assistance providers to determine your options there. And I'll be happy to share more contact information into the chat as well as additional resources for our REAP program. But then again, this is a Justice 40 initiative, and it's just a very historic moment that we're in right now, getting this money out the door.
Thank you, JoBeth. Ari, let's get to you. So many developers, utilities, and state energy offices are interested in not just stacking across program for one type of technology, but also pairing community solar with storage, with EV charging, with other technologies. So what opportunities are there out there to braid federal and state funds again across incentive programs, and how should folks think about that?
Thanks so much, Vero, and thanks so much for having me on this panel. I've got this big act to follow. Go last of the other of my co-panelists. So thank you both, all three of you, for providing so much great information to the attendees here. I think that this is where it gets really exciting. There's a lot of new technologies that can come on board that can enable community solar in ways that we're really only starting to get to the very beginning of ways that these technologies can amplify the green transition. As most of us all know, the future of energy is going to be more electric, and those energy resources are going to be more distributed. And community solar is definitely one of those aspects, right? That it's a distributed energy resource. Community solar facilities are rarely the size of traditional power plants. And so there's an awful lot of new technology that needs to be brought to bear to ensure that the community solar can reach the subscriber. What I like to do is think about community solar facilities in 4 different buckets, whether or not those facilities are sub-distribution or sub-transmission, and then whether or not those facilities are low income or market rate. And obviously some of these facilities are a blending of the two. But it's worthwhile thinking about what is your project oriented towards. Is it oriented towards a low-income community solar facility that's sub-distribution, or are we talking about a mammoth market rate community solar facility that's sub-transmission? This is going to be really important in terms of A, the technologies that you're going to want to bring to bear, but B, what federal funding is going to be available to combine with your initial investment so that you can really maximize the opportunity. So let's go through some of these opportunities. So for the low-income community, as lots and lots of panelists already have mentioned, there are lots and lots of opportunities at the state energy office level or at other state government entities to provide for low-income communities that are brand new. Historically, it was just the Weatherization Assistance Program that provided national low-income benefits to residents in the area of energy. Now we have things like the electrification and the whole homes rebates program, which are run out of SCEP, the State and Community Energy Program where I work. Those rebate programs are administered by state energy offices, and those rebate programs can vary from state to state. So if your community solar is supporting multiple states, you might want to think about how those different states are going to orient themselves towards the low-income community and what sorts of technologies and products they're offering so that they can be woven really well with the community solar offerings that you guys are delivering. I know lots of people have talked about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and most people are probably focusing on solar for all, but there's also the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, which is another $6 billion pot of money that can provide for stackability to support, in particular, LIDAC communities. So there's a lot of opportunities here for us to weave solar for all, other investment opportunities, WAP, and the rebates program to ensure that recipients who are low income can be availing themselves of all of their opportunities. Moving further along to market rate, every state and lots of communities are getting climate pollution reduction grants from the EPA as well. Those grants can be used to support community solar or achieve other opportunities to reduce climate pollution. And one example would be better storage, both in the sub-transmission and in the sub-distribution areas. So if you're looking at large utility scale storage, or if you're looking at an individual storage opportunity for residents, CPRG might be a really good place for you to go. There are also lots of small community programs like the Energy Futures Grants, which will enable you to demonstrate new technology pairings with things like community solar. Looking at the sub-transmission level, So if you're thinking about those mammoth community solar opportunities, you really want to look at things like GRIP, which is grid resilience out of the Grid Deployment Office, making sure that the transmission that brings that solar to market is resilient and can withstand the climate change that we've already wrought on the system. There's also a great program out of the Energy Efficiency Renewable Energy Department or administration here in the Department of Energy called RSTEP, which helps you with siting renewable energy facilities, and in particular, this sub-transmission area that we were talking about. And then just want to swing back to sub-distribution and looking at sub-distribution, there are some really great programs out of HUD, the Green Resilient Retrofit Program, which could be paired really well with community solar. There's a schools program. Schools could be great hosts for community solar. That schools program is run out of DOE SCEP. And then there's lots and lots of small private companies that are availing themselves of a loan program office loan guarantees to advance new technologies like virtual power plants and microgrids, so that when your community solar array is sub-distribution and is on a feeder that is either maxed out by load or maxed out by supply, there are innovative, cost-effective, technologically relevant ways to solve that problem. So I think I went over time, but thank you very much, Vero, and lots of exciting programs out there. I would just say that I've been working in solar for a little while, for a long time. The bottleneck's been money. And now it's really exciting that there is more than enough money to get to do all of the community solar we want.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for this great summary. So some of the questions from the audience here. Let's start with kind of a clarification about direct pay. Diana Eddowes is asking about co-ops and asking whether they are eligible for a direct pay, and co-ops, and for the most part, are nonprofits.
It's a good question. Co-ops are nonprofits, some of them are not. It really depending on the tax status of a specific entity. The proposed rules for elective pay, again, list the types of entities and their tax status that qualify for elective pay as the guidance is proposed. But they should check back and see for more definitive information when the final rules come out later this year.
And later this year is in the future. No,
in the future, later this year.
There's no date. All right, just checking. The next question on the list here, we have Juan Fernandez, who is asking, saying there were some question marks about the domestic content guidelines in terms of product eligibility. Are there some updates or links on this specific area? And Juan, I'm not sure whether you mean the domestic content adder or the bonus program is what I'm assuming, or unless it relates to direct pay. But maybe Anisha or Gabriella, if you want to try answering both.
So the domestic content information is still proposed. We are working through public comments and issues on that. And there'll be more information provided to the public soon.
Okay, and that's the domestic content bonus program, right?
Yes, so it's the rules of domestic content to realize the full value of some of the credits.
Great. What about the domestic content rules that are applicable to the phase out in direct pay? Can you explain a little bit what that is, and also tell us if there is any update on what that will look like?
I wish I could give you more information about that, but it will all come. I'm sorry, I'm like the worst person to invite to something like this.
No, that's all right.
Again, it will be in the proposed or in the final regulations that will be available to the public fairly soon.
Right. And currently, and based on what's in the, I think we can say based on what's in the tax code, that there is a phase out that the direct pay will only be available if you meet specific domestic content requirements. Unless you're below 1 megawatt. Correct me if I'm wrong, Anisha.
Correct.
And I think that what you're saying is we don't know how that's going to be implemented moving forward. And that's also TBD. All right. Gabriella, you mentioned the 48 little e is closing. Is there, or are there, where is the remaining capacity, if any, within the 4 categories that you mentioned earlier?
So I can't speak to that specifically, but that's why we publish the program capacity dashboard on the website, where you can view capacity updates per category. And that information is available to the public.
Okay.
So that link is in the chat. If you head to the DOE landing page, you can find it that way. You can also access it through the specific link attached to the dashboard in my message in the chat.
Can I add a little bit more to answer that question? So Gabby is right. Obviously, DOE has the dashboard that shows what is remaining for 48E. One of the things that Gabby mentioned earlier was that 50% of the capacity for the program is set aside for projects that meet specific geographic or ownership criteria. There is still capacity remaining in that set aside. This intersects with direct pay and transferability, because many of the institutions that are encouraged to apply through that set aside also could utilize direct pay. And as Gabby mentioned, the goals of the program, we would overall in the IRA, we are trying to encourage as much market participation by many different types of entities and actors in the renewable energy space. That means not-for-profits, that means small businesses, diverse owners. And we recognize that there needs to be mechanisms and opportunities available to them specifically. So you definitely see that in 48E, but that's also really the purpose of these monetization mechanisms.
Thank you. Okay, another question from Robert Philippos, or Phillips, excuse me. Administration change and national priorities change. Do you feel the incentive levels available today will be around in years to come? Tough question. How do you address those who feel investing in renewables, and in particular community solar, is risky, as the incentives may not be sustained in the future? And I think Ari, maybe if you want to take a crack at this one.
Okay, so I would just say that even if you pressed pause right now, and I am not in the business of predicting what's going to happen in the future, but if you pressed pause right now, the amount of funding that's already come out of the federal government, the amount of loan opportunities there are, and already the tax guidance that's been given out, just now, I believe, is a sufficient catalyst to attract a lot of private sector investment. And we still have, just shy of 12 months of this administration left to go. So I think that there's a lot of runway left to make sure that programs are well deployed, funding is well available, and that the market will be accustomed to the tax advantages and other incentives available to deploy community solar. I think the last panel mentioned that we're set to triple or something like that, the amount of community solar that's supposed to be coming on board. And that's just what's planned. So, I'm certainly not going to give investment advice, but it does seem like there is a real sea change, a real momentum shift. And it will be very, very difficult to slow that down.
I tend to agree in the sense that the money that's committed is committed, and unless Congress gets together to change their mind about the IRA, we're in a good situation. So sticking with you, Ari, and Jo Beth as well. So when you're thinking about stacking, whether it is for just community solar or community solar and other programs, we're looking at a very different compliance, not totally different, but different eligibility requirement, different compliance requirement, different reporting requirements across all the agencies. And, the federal government is not known for its audacious flexibility when it comes to reporting and compliance. So how can your organizations help? How can SCEP help? How can USDA help when it comes to figuring out, BABA, DBA, NEPA, all of the acronyms that get thrown at you when you say, I'd like to access federal funding for my capital stack?
Yeah, and what makes it even more difficult is that some of those rules are different for BIL than they are for IRA. And so what's really fortunate is that state energy offices often are the ones who are thinking about planning these programs, braiding these funds, and they are being very well briefed on the do's and don'ts of how to do that to ensure regulatory compliance. Here at DOE, at SCEP, it feels like my entire job right now is how to comply with DBA, how to comply with BABA, how to comply with NEPA, how to comply with the National Historic Preservation Act. And a lot of my job also is trying to work with our general counsel to make sure that the ways in which you can legally braid all of this money is really, really obvious to laymen and not just administrative or regulatory lawyers. So we're working on it. Is the short answer.
Okay, so we should say go talk to SCEP is the answer.
Go talk to SCEP, but first
Talk to your
state energy office. Talk to your state energy office. Wherever you are, talk to your state energy office.
I will second that. Yeah.
They'll talk to us for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll echo that as well. Additionally, at USDA, we are in the process of hiring 40 climate fellows to help assist with our REAP processing, which includes staffing with the environmental review process. So we should have those in place by April, and that will be a huge lift for processing those applications. Additionally, you can contact our state energy coordinators, and I've shared the PDF I shared has that a link to the list of the state energy coordinators. So
fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, JoBeth. And please do send the link if those jobs are still available. Please do put it in the chat so that people can apply if they would like to become a fellow for USDA.
I will definitely bump if we end up opening that back up, but as of right now, the application process is closed. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck then on the end of the recruiting process. Thank you so much to all four of you, Anisha, Gabriella, JoBeth, and Ari. And let's hand over the mic to Ali Robbins, who is a Lendl Reed contractor, supporting DOE's National Community Solar Partnership for the next session on funding the future of community solar, resourcing the full deployment ecosystem. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Vero. And what an incredibly insightful panel that was a great segue to our next conversation, funding the future of community solar, resourcing the full development ecosystem. As Ari so eloquently put it, the bottleneck is money. So I am your moderator today. I'm Ali Robbins, contractor supporting the National Community Solar Partnership. Before we dive into our conversation today with our esteemed panelists, I want to bring your attention to a very live opportunity for those developers and financiers in our virtual room. This is an opportunity that you can take advantage of today and make connections that get your projects financed. You do not have to wait for any final regs or lengthy government timelines. This is a resource that you have available right now. And I see, over 300 of you on this call. I expect at least 100 folks today. That is my goal for you to join the Community Power Accelerator. So we heard time and again from our stakeholders that access to capital is the critical missing piece of the community solar puzzle. So we sought to standardize equitable access to financing. Now I'm going to do something really fancy and I'm going to share my screen. So just give me a second. All right. Hopefully you all can see that. Yeah. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully we're good and you all
looks good, Ellie.
Fabulous. Thank you. So the Community Power Accelerator is your resource. It's tailored specifically to help expand capacity and expertise for community-led programs, and particularly help provide give help to development of new community solar facilities. And since it's Valentine's Day and we can't resist the urge to tell you a pun, the Community Power Accelerator can be your funding matchmaker. Now, if this webpage is looking new to you, it's because it is. Nicole mentioned it earlier. We've had a ton of improvements to the accelerator over the last year since we announced it at the NCSP Summit last year. And this is where developers and financiers and philanthropic organizations can virtually handshake and connect with each other in hopes of getting deals done. And community solar built with all of those meaningful benefits that we've kind of woven in through this conversation today. As Nicole pointed out earlier, we have over 100 projects on the platform waiting to meet financiers and philanthropists. There's almost $1 billion in capital available from partners on the accelerator. We also back those connections up by providing training and education via the University of New Hampshire Learning Lab, and by making sure that these projects really and truly are walking the talk when it comes to building community solar with meaningful benefits. We have a comprehensive credit-ready checklist and workbook that was built in partnership with over 60 capital partners to make sure that everybody is speaking the same language. We know that community solar projects often do have to take an innovative approach, so we offer free one-to-one technical assistance to help you tackle all of your pre-development tasks. Our intention behind these resources is to truly provide soup to nuts on how to build community solar. We'll actually hear from our panelists today who have used these resources to develop their community solar projects. These panelists were actually winners of the Community Power Accelerator Prize, which was a $10 million competition to offer pre-development financing. Now I'm going to show you a quick peek behind the curtain of the accelerator to show you what you can look forward to once you are approved to join the platform. And just a quick note here, while I'm going to get signed in. Again, we're being very technologically advanced today. You will have to fill out a form to join this platform. There are no lurkers, all right? So this is an extremely important step that you need to take in order to join the platform, because there's actually an algorithm behind this that does a ton of work to match projects up with financiers. So once you're fully logged in, you'll see a homepage that looks kind of like this, pretty bare bones, I know, but this ribbon at the top is really where you're going to do your deep dive. You're going to discover connections here. And this is pretty much what your projects will look like once they're up on the accelerator and you're starting to court financing. You can actually see we have one of our Community Power Accelerator Prize winners projects right here. There's some awesome meaningful benefits icons that allow you to determine what these projects are offering right up front. And our search locations are pretty well advanced at this stage. You can search by different types of meaningful benefits, along with capital sought, as well as capacity and even location. So if you're a financier and you only finance projects on the West Coast, you can filter by that option. Additionally, you're gonna talk about your connections. That's what we're all here for. It is not similar to LinkedIn, where you message directly on the platform. Once you accept a connection, it will go directly to your email. Obviously, I'm just a demo, so no one wants to connect with me right now, but I certainly hope that you all will take advantage of this resource as soon as possible, since that money is available today. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen. All right, I'm so psyched that that worked. Oh, we're really technologically advanced here. So if we can go ahead and bring back all and spotlight all of our esteemed panelists, that would be wonderful. Fabulous. Okay, without further ado, I want to do some quick introductions to our panelists today. And we will have some time for some audience Q&A at the end. So as Vero said earlier, sharpen your pencils. Introducing our first panelist is Sierra Jakovics. She is the UN and Energy Policy and Project Manager for Mana Pacific. Mana Pacific is a social impact company organized in Hawaii as a sustainable business corporation that develops scalable resiliency and renewable energy projects in Hawaii and the 22 Pacific Island countries. Again, she's also a Community Power Accelerator Prize winner, so excited to have her here. Also, Emily Robichaud is the Senior Vice President for Climate and Environmental Programs at Opportunity Finance Network, which is a financial intermediary for community development financial institutions. She is responsible for developing and implementing a comprehensive climate strategy for the organization's network of over 400 CDFIs that serve communities across the United States. And sorry, my cat is actually trying to make an appearance on this webinar today. Chris Diaz, who is the co-CEO of Seminole Financial Services. In his role as co-CEO, he oversees the business and development team, as well as capital and investor relations. He has been responsible for the identification, evaluation, and negotiation of renewable energy finance transactions, focusing on solar and wind. To date, Chris has closed over $2 billion in construction and permanent financing, totaling over 800 megawatts of renewable energy. And last, but certainly not least, since he is probably NCSP's #1 fan, is Joseph Smith, who is the CEO of ADL Solutions, LLC. Joseph brings a wealth of experience as an electrician for 28 years. His company, ADL Solutions, specializes in solar and EV installations. His projects that he's proposed in the Community Power Accelerator Prize are in a rural town in Illinois, as well as the inner city of Chicago. So without further ado, I'm so glad to have our panelists here. It would be awesome if we could, spotlight them. Fabulous, we're getting there. And I also see someone's awesome picture with a horse. I need to talk to that person later. So great, thanks. Glad to have you all here. So in terms of level setting this conversation today, I'm hoping that you all might be able to answer for us, what does it truly mean for a project to be finance ready? So for Sierra and Joseph, maybe like what development milestones did you all have to reach before starting a conversation with financiers? And for Chris and Emily, what do financiers look for when they're presented with projects, especially ones that serve historically disadvantaged communities? Sierra, do you want to take a first stab?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Ale, for your fantastic introductions and highlighting the Community Power Accelerator. That was great. So to be finance ready, we really, before we start talking to financiers, we try to have a financial model, general project specs and scope, and preferably to have site control already secured. However, there are cases where we've had to talk to financiers before site control has been completed. So as an example, with the projects that you highlighted earlier in our co-development for the 100% community-owned projects on Molokai, us and Shake Energy, we had to reach out to financiers before even submitting and winning the bid and proposal from the utility. So it really depends project to project. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Joseph, I think you're trying to, you were muted for a second.
Yeah, so I would say with us, it is really about putting together the team, right? And making sure the team was aligned to the mission. That was like foremost, so one of our missions is to develop the project within a disadvantaged community, right? So actually getting the team online with that mission and knowing that we can't go off course from that is key. And then some of the other things that the accelerator actually taught us is to actually identify community members. That was particular. We actually kind of got into stakeholder meetings to kind of see how we would shape and plan. So that got into planning for the project. And then the performer, having a good solid performer, having site control before that, having a good solid performer, knowing the different regulations, because we went from inner city to rural. So now actually getting in contact with the permitting department and kind of understanding what it would take. And subscription management, we had to have a good subscription management plan, and we had to have a good O&M plan. That's kind of was the easy part, the O&M plan, being an electrician. And then kind of to piggyback on the panelists before us, which was awesome. Like my brain was blown with all the different information there, but actually understanding, the capital stack, like to know what we're going to actually ask the financiers, right? So that kind of helped in our model, like what is the ask, right? And what can we come up with, and how can we shore up that ask from that? So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, there's definitely, that's a great point, Joseph. Emily, turning it over to you all for your slightly different perspective on kind of what are financiers presented with, and how do you even begin to make these kind of complex decisions around financing?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Allie and DOE, for bringing us all here together today. Really looking forward to this conversation and have enjoyed everything that's been shared so far. I would encourage everyone to really think about, you're developing what could be a very long-term relationship with a financier, especially if you're looking at permanent financing. This might be a relationship that you have for 10, 15, 20 years. And I would approach it in the same way that you would develop any other type of relationship. Financiers are looking to understand who you are as a developer, what your experience has been, what your mission is, and they're also looking to understand the project itself. How far along is the project? Where is it in the development life cycle? What type of financing you're looking for? These basics really go into understanding if that project and developer are a fit for a particular lender, because lenders will have different appetites for different types of loans, different sizes of loans, coming in at different parts of the development timeline. So I would, one additional point on that is I would suggest to developers to really think in advance as you're speaking to financiers about the revenue sources for a project. That is the primary source of repayment for a loan, and that's going to be critical information for a financier taking a look at your project. And on the question of, how we can drive financing to historically disadvantaged communities, you mentioned, Allie, about OFN serving as an intermediary for the community development financial institution industry. And these are financial institutions that, in order to be certified by the Department of Treasury, they must designate at least 60% of their financing activities to one or more LMI or underserved communities. So there is very much an interest amongst the CDFI industry in finding these projects that are serving historically disadvantaged communities and finding that right match with developers. So there's a lot of interest in driving financing there. Let me stop there, turn it over to Chris, and happy to share more about the CDFI industry.
Yeah, thank you, Emily. And Allie, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's a true honor, and I'm glad I could participate. I think it was Sierra or Joseph made the comment about engaging early on in the process with the financiers. And I think that's a great idea. It'll allow you to put your numbers together and have a better understanding of where you need to be as far as your costs, and also as far as the production and how all the numbers are going to pencil out. That's the deal doesn't make sense in the beginning. You're wasting your time. You need it to really make sense and pencil out from a numbers perspective. And as a person doing a lot of debt in this space, I always appreciate someone that comes very organized, has a nice package together. It really, can articulate what the project is, who they are. It doesn't. We finance people's very first deal. So experience from the specific developer doesn't always mean that you can or can't get something financed, but knowing you have a strong team. Is the EPC strong? Is the subscriber aggregator for community solar, are they strong? The O&M provider, are they strong? So that helps balance out maybe someone's lack of experience. Also, have a good and clear understanding of your financial situation. Lenders, it's not a dollar for dollar thing where if you have to have X amount of money in the bank in order to get a loan for X amount, but there needs to be some financial wherewithal. And if individually people don't have that financial wherewithal, then, we're always happy to connect people with other people that like to take part in deals that have some financial wherewithal. So it's a good way to kind of help people get along, get their first couple deals done and move down the road.
Yeah, that's some pretty sage advice there, Chris. We actually, and perhaps our two developers here can speak to this, but one of the key pieces of the curriculum of the Learning Lab when prize participants are going through it is that they actually have to develop that pitch deck. And we actually are providing pitch coaching to some of the teams. So it's definitely an important process. So I'm wondering if Sierra and Joseph, you can talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that you all had as you were kind of going through the Learning Lab and how the resources around the Community Power Accelerator helped you bridge those gaps. Since it is quite interesting to see, what knowledge base people come into the community solar spectrum with. And, Joseph, for instance, you've been an electrician, the majority of your life. So I'm curious if you can speak to the transition there as well.
Yeah, so as you said, that being an electrician 28 years, one of the greatest challenges was the financial piece, the performer, understanding, the language, understanding the financial culture as you would have it, right? Like building a project and understanding like how the solar panels go in and how they're going to produce electricity. That's a pretty easy conversation. So I would say the Learning Lab, and all the technical assistance that that the NCSP that you provided, like that really helped me. I really had to learn the financial piece. I did bring in another partner as well, so it let me know that I had to bring in another partner, but I still had to understand it as well, being in the class. So I would say that was one of the challenges for me, to learn and really just take time to understand it, take time to ask questions. I would say, another challenge from the actual, Learning Lab was, the time. It was a lot of time. It was like really, we were like learning in class, and the time to understand all this information, financial information, how to put together a community solar project. And just to take a step back, so I literally came from being an electrician, right? Small electrical company, just with the thought of doing installation, right? And really after contact with, the National Community Solar Partnership, it really motivated me to want to become a developer, right? To do more, to really partake, to have a greater participation in what we call in this equitable energy transition. So it made me want to have a greater participation, but to learn how to develop it, it took that was a bit of a challenge to, financially, to learn all of the it's still challenging to learn all of to learn all of the capital sources, to even situate through all of the abundance of money available now. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'll
Yeah,
leave it there,
developing that capital stack. Yeah, for sure. And Sierra, I know you all have unique challenges as well, since you're building these projects on islands. There's a whole host of regulatory efforts that go along with that. So I'm curious, kind of tell us your journey about how you got here and where you're planning to go next, and some key challenges there.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Ali. And I definitely agree with Joseph. I mean, the Learning Lab and the TA sessions continue to be just fantastic. And I feel like the message of more collaboration is better. We all have the tools and we have everything that needs to come together to develop successful long-term projects, but it's about connecting those dots. I would say one challenge, particularly with working in our projects in the Pacific and some of our more emerging projects, like our community solar project in American Samoa, which we actually incubated alongside the Community Power Accelerator process. It's challenging to match different paces, particularly in the Pacific. Things can move at its own pace and you just can't really premeditate that. And staying with the process of the Community Power Accelerator and matching that timeline can definitely have its own challenges. And yeah, there are definitely other aspects too that I know we've talked about before with insurance and its own unique costs in the Pacific there. So happy to touch on those, but I also want to let everyone else speak too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious too, since Emily, you talked a little bit about the roles of CDFIs, and I'm wondering if you can say more about that. And just, similarly for Seminole, I mean, what is the role that you all are trying to play in this in the push to deploy capital? And how do you view any sort of trends within the community solar market that you all are paying attention to?
Sure, I'll share a couple thoughts. When we think of CDFIs, we think of them as the capillaries of the financial system. So we all know the really big banks, we know, maybe some of the regional banks, but community development financial institutions are the lenders that are very deeply rooted in community. They might be working at smaller loan sizes. They're often providing technical assistance. They're an incredibly good resource for small businesses, early stage developers, community groups looking, to do something for the first time and wanting to establish that track record with a financial institution that can then lead to relationships with larger financial institutions as project sizes grow. So I would definitely encourage everyone to think of CDFIs as a partner as you go on your community solar journey. And I will just say in the context of specifically of OFN, as an intermediary for this industry, we've issued a call to action for all CDFIs to be climate lenders by 2028. And we are actively putting our money where our mouth is in the sense of we're supporting this effort with capitalization and capacity building. We announced in December 6 CDFIs that received $8.5 million from OFN to deploy to climate solutions in their communities. We have another financing round open right now, and we expect to support a further 25 CDFIs with grants. We have training opportunities for CDFIs, and we're actively, building capacity within the network so that we can support what we see as the kind of confluence, the coming together of community development with climate justice. So community development financial institutions have been in communities for years, almost 40 years, providing capital in places that are harder to reach. And now we're actively infusing climate solutions as part of their loan profiles.
Oh, I love that, Emily. You're moving the needle on multiple fronts. So thank you for that. And please be sure to share any links in the chat of open opportunities if you can share them. Chris, over to you. Similar question. Yeah, just trying to get a good sense about how Seminole sits along all this spectrum and sort of where you all are trying to head. And I would, love to hear a little bit more about your role in all of it.
Sure. So, Seminole's been around since 2009. We really got into the space because there was a void, a lack of financing from banks and other institutions for smaller deals. We first started out doing 500 kW to about 3 or 4 megawatts. And that's when the price for a deal was about $8 a watt, a kilowatt to get built. But now we focus on deals in a 1 megawatt to about 40 megawatts. We did our first community solar deal, I think, in 2016. We've probably done well over 100 of those since then. We really like the community solar space. These deals, it was easy for our credit team to kind of get up to speed on it quickly. We like the credit profiles of them. We're able to finance deals without required credit scores. Some lenders, they're a little stricter when it comes to that for the off takes. But we've just had really good success with it. And there's a lot of opportunity out there for people to get their deals financed. And we really do take a kind of relationship approach to it. We've done people's very first deal, and then we end up doing multiple deals with them. We'll underwrite pools of deals because a lot of times people will come with us and they have 3, 4, 5 community solar deals in this location or that location. So that helps streamline the process too for them as well. So it's been great, and we really have enjoyed the opportunity to finance these types of deals and done a lot of good around the country.
Yeah, Chris, I love that we're talking about the relationship aspect when we're approaching financing. I think, it's often you can get lost in the sauce, right? Of, trying to go out there and find these financing mechanisms. And I know in particular, it's got me thinking about the meaningful benefits and how to market that accurately to financiers. And I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about community ownership and like those unique models that community solar offers. And I know, Joseph, you've kind of dipped your toe into that space. And I'm curious if you could speak to a little bit about the development process and how you get those projects to pencil with those really great knockout meaningful benefits, and sort of what kind of challenges that you all had to overcome in order to make those projects pencil.
That was for me. So I would say we first we really started with a good community stakeholder, right? Understanding what the community wanted, which benefit. I mean, I would say that was one challenge. We wanted to like incorporate more than 5 benefits. So maybe deciding which benefit the community actually wanted most or saw the greatest importance, that kind of helped it narrow the project down. And, having a resolve, like initially, like I said, starting with a team with a mission, and then having a resolve that, there has to be a meaningful savings to the community, right? And just not giving up on that. And one of the ways, we're kind of working with the EPC. And so now we brought the EPC on as a community partner, as an EPC from the community. And so we brought them in as a design build, you would say, with the thought of now, how do we make this project feasible and keep the benefits, not make the project feasible and get rid of the benefits, but make the project feasible, keeping your benefits. And that was one of the ways, that's one of the ways that we continue to do it, to work closely with an EPC from the neighborhood. The training kind of helps us get community members from the neighborhood, and we try to kind of get a buy-in. So we're trying to leverage like the labor cost as much as we can, and to make the project feasible, right? So we're using like, the labor, and then, just really, at one time we had to come down. We just had to sacrifice just, we had to make the project like really bare, meaning instead of like we had to do a fixed tilt, what everybody knows, that we couldn't use, expensive machinery. So we kind of made the project a little more simple to make it feasible. So that's a couple of ways that I can say we've been navigating through making a project feasible. One thing I would say that I'm from Illinois, right? Chicago, Illinois. So shout out to Illinois and Chicago. And we have great state incentives. So it hasn't been extremely hard, right? I mean, compared to, I'm sure it's a lot of people from it's a lot of us from around the country. So we have great state incentives here to pair with all of the other federal and low income, these 48 little E's. So it hasn't been extremely hard, but hopefully that answers the question. So
it does, yes. It gives us a lot to think about. There's always this kind of constant pull and push of, is the money and the mission aligned, right? And it's oftentimes that you see these community solar projects have to make really difficult trade-offs in order to pencil. And I'm also curious too, back over to Emily and Chris, and this sort of gets into one of the questions that's been posted. So we're kind of double dipping into the Q&A here. In terms of the rates, someone had brought up, that interest rates can be quite high, that it's difficult to make these projects pencil. And are these regional differences, or is this a full market trend about the rates? it seems to the person who made this comment that interest buy down funds seem very limited. So back to the kind of trends question and about how to like successfully deploy this huge amount of money that you all have. Kind of what are those opportunities that you're looking for? And yeah, let me stop there, Emily and Chris, if you want to take a stab at the rates question.
Sure. So I'll just lead off by saying interest rates, national trend. However, revenue opportunities, especially for solar projects, primarily driven at the state level. So I think it's really important to leverage all the different opportunities, particularly federal funding opportunities that were discussed in some of the prior panels, in trying to fill some of the gaps, especially at a time where debt might be more expensive. I am hopeful that the CDFI industry can continue to deliver debt financing at below market rates, but it is challenging because of the source of that capital. I can share, of course, OFN. We work with a number of different partners to source the lowest cost capital possible, but we are certainly in a nationwide a much more difficult environment for that than we were a few years ago. So let me pause there, see if Chris has other things to add, but I would encourage people to really be creative and flexible when thinking about how to put together their capital stack in the current rate environment.
Yeah, so I would say right now, just like for a construction loan, we're seeing rates and the 30-day SOFR plus 200, 250, all the way up to 450, 500 on long-term, like a mini perm per se, where you're talking about a 6 or 7 year term with I always say length of program amortization. So using New York, for instance, it's a 25-year kind of program. So we would do a 25-year amortization and a 6-year term. And those rates are typically the 5-year treasury plus, you can see those anywhere from 250 up to maybe 4. It varies. I always tell people, don't get caught in the interest rate trap. People focus right in on, interest rate, I need the lowest interest rate. There's a lot of other things that go into that. There's origination fees, there's legal costs, there's a lot of other, so you want to look at the total package. Don't just focus on the lowest interest rate. And I tell people that all the time. If you want to be in a relationship with a lender, you need to be transparent. If you're happy, if your deal works based on the rate that they're giving you, then everybody needs to make money, and you want to make sure that the person you're dealing with can get your deal done. You don't want to spend 6 months trying to get a deal closed with someone that's a newer lender per se, and educating them and helping them get there. I see things all the time where people come to me and, your rate's a little higher, I'm gonna go over here. And then 4 or 5 months later, they come back and say, I couldn't get it done over there. Can you guys get it done? And then, we get it done relatively quickly, and now they're down the road and they're focusing on the next project. But that's where I would say that's a pretty good sense for where rates are right now in the marketplace.
And Allie, if I could just quickly add, there was a reference in a prior panel to, a lot of times the barrier in the past has been capital, and that is going to shift very significantly and has already shifted because of the scale of federal financing that's become available. And I would just add that as Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund dollars begin to flow to communities later this year, I think that will also have an impact on the cost of capital available. So
that's a great thing to know, Emily. Yeah, thanks for chiming in there. I mean, to me, this panel has been chock full of really practical advice. Oftentimes when we think about financing, it seems so far above our heads. I know for me, as not a financial expert, like rooting this in real tangible advice is extremely important. So I want to thank you all for bringing that. We did get a really interesting question. I think it might be our last question if we have time. Have you seen effective tax-exempt models for developing and financing solar projects that get direct pay? And are there any best examples of that?
I think it's maybe a little too early for the direct pay. I've seen people executing on transfers, but I have not seen a direct pay. But I think it really is very helpful for municipalities and nonprofits and those types of organizations, because they weren't able to take part in that piece of the capital stack, which could be as much as, depending on the credit, it could be 30, 40+% of the entire capital stack on the back end. So it's I think soon we'll start seeing, and there'll be a lot, I'm sure they'll be politicized and, out there in the market, people know what's going on.
I can add,
Go ahead, Sierra.
Thanks. Yeah, I can add to that as well. On our co-development for the community-owned solar in Molokai. So one barrier is the fact that they're community-owned. We can't have any equity investors, so it's all debt. And the fact that the cooperative is a nonprofit co-op, they can now take advantage of transferability and direct pay. So that is something to soften out the financing challenge with having only debt in 100% community-owned scenario. But we still do need to have that bridge financing to get through NTP and COD and really meet all our milestones. But just wanted to add that on.
Yeah, and Emily, did you have a point as well?
Exactly what Sierra mentioned, that it's less about the certainty of, the availability of those dollars. Obviously, we know the government's going to pay. It's just a question of the timing and how that gap gets filled for the upfront costs, whether that's equity, people coming out of pocket and then they get repaid by the direct pay tax credit, or whether there's bridge financing in place. So it's just a timing question.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there was also a follow-up question to this, which are there any financing sources that are actively giving tax exempt entities bridge financing for direct pay eligible projects? So I feel like we kind of touched on that already, which is fabulous. We're doing a great job here. That being said, I'm just double checking to make sure we don't got any more questions. Yeah, I'm not sure if we can answer this last question, but I do feel like we kind of hit all the main points that we wanted to today. So I'm happy if anyone wants to make a last final parting piece of advice to our audience. You are more than welcome to before I hand it back over to Anna. You have to speak now, forever hold your peace. So
I would just say engage your finance people, ask questions. I think you'll find that people like to be interactive and they like transparency. So,
and I would say become a active participant in this equitable energy transition as much as possible.
I would say your first transaction is probably going to be the hardest. So if it's hard, keep going. It will get easier in future iterations. So to Joseph's point, we all need to be a part of this. So get through that first one. It will get easier.
And Sierra?
I was just going to say, especially if you're a financer, join the Community Power Accelerator. If you want to develop a community solar project, consider doing the next tranche of the Community Power Accelerator Prize.
Oh, I love it. I love it, Sierra. Thanks so much to our panelists. I had so much fun in our conversation today. And thank you to our audience members for asking your questions. And we will certainly get into some of the nitty-gritty details in our breakout session later. So come join the fun. And I will hand it back over to Anna.
Thank you, Allie. And thank you once again to all of our speakers, our panelists, and our moderators today. If you've been with us all day, thank you to you too. This is, it's been a quick 3 hours so far, but we've packed a lot in, that's for sure. And I'll just acknowledge, we've spent a lot of time today talking about the successes and the opportunities in the community solar industry. We've spent time talking about the successes and opportunities within the National Community Solar Partnership Program, and all the challenges ahead to meeting our target. But we would be remiss if we did not also recognize the successes of the many individual organizations and communities that are a part of this network and that are out there tackling these challenges head on and driving meaningful benefits to households. So before we head into those really exciting deep dive conversations, please stick around. We want to take a few minutes to celebrate you, the NCSP community members. So next slide. As Nicole mentioned in her remarks earlier, We are nearing 2,000 members from over 1,200 different organizations across the US and its territories in the National Community Solar Partnership. These members engage with and support each other in so many different ways. We heard about how the Community Power Accelerator is doing that really well, but also in our online community. Just in this last year, we had over 9,000 engagements from our members and over 500 new connections and conversations started. And we are continuously inspired by the incredible resource sharing and network building that happens in this network. And just want to underscore that the value of this partnership is really driven by you all. So if you are not already a member of the NCSP partnership, please join. We'll drop the link in the chat again, but it is really the greatest value of this network is its community. So we wanted to take a couple of minutes to recognize a number of NCSP members that have demonstrated a deep commitment to growing their community solar operations and helping us meeting our NCSP target, our 2025 target, and prioritizing meaningful benefits to households and communities while they're doing that. Next slide. And the way we're doing this is by celebrating a really large number of 2023 prize winners. We talked a little bit about prizes so far in this webinar, but prizes are a funding mechanism of the federal government where you can compete for cash prizes that are awarded to you sometimes in phases, sometimes all at once, but really meant to recognize leadership in specific areas of community solar and in other areas across the federal government. So I want to start by kind of taking a look at the scope of all of the great work that was done by our members through these prizes this year. So first, we can click one forward. We ran our second round of the Sunny Awards for Equitable Community Solar this year. If you were at our summit last year, you'll remember that we were recognizing our grand prize winners from our first round then. This year, we awarded an additional 5 grand prize winners that each received $10,000 in cash prizes and 1 meaningful benefit special recognition winner that received a $5,000 cash prize. So congratulations once again to these winners. We announced them back in November. I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in just a bit, but wanted to note them on this map here. That's not all. We also ran our first round of the Community Power Accelerator Prize, where we received a huge volume of applications and ultimately selected 25 organizations to receive $50,000 in cash prizes and advance in the challenge. These organizations came, as you can see from this map, from across the United States and its territories and represented many different types and sizes of organizations, Joseph and Sierra being 2 of those organizations that we spotlighted on our last panel. Each of these teams have committed to developing at least 1 megawatt of community solar across 2 or more community solar projects and including meaningful benefits in those projects. And as we just heard in the last panel, this can be a real challenge and takes a lot of real effort to make those projects happen. It has been wonderful over the last year to work with these organizations more closely, and we are looking forward to continuing to work with the organizations that are advancing to phase 2 of this prize. We didn't just run 1 round of the Community Power Accelerator Prize this year, though. We actually ran 2 rounds of it. So we are excited to welcome another cohort of 25 winners to our Community Power Accelerator community this year, which we just announced last month, this new group of 25 winners. These organizations will soon be participating in our Learning Lab program and starting to develop their portfolio of projects. So congratulations again to all of these winning teams, and we're so grateful to partner in this work with you. So we can go to the next slide. When you all registered for this summit, one of the fields that you were able to fill out for us was what would make this summit a valuable experience to you. And quite a few of you said that you are always looking for examples and case studies of how to do this work well. So I wanted to take just a few minutes to spotlight some of our Sunny Awards winners and the really creative ways that they are maximizing meaningful benefits in their projects and programs. So I'm going to start with the Illinois Solar for All program, which was led by the Illinois Power Agency. This is a state-led program that supports 29 megawatts of community solar projects all of which serve at least 50% low to moderate income households. This was established by the 2017 Future Energy Jobs Act in the state of Illinois and expanded by the 2021 Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. Each of these projects has at least 50% bill savings, and at least five of the energized projects have actually been able to maximize utility assistance to be able to provide totally no cost savings for project subscribers, so 100% bill savings. The program also reserves 25% of the program's incentives for community-owned projects or energy sovereign projects, and provides additional points when they're scoring these projects to ones that are community-owned. The program requires that all of the participating vendors, so those are the community solar developers and owners, hire trainees from Illinois job training programs for a minimum percentage of the total project work hours. And they also, as of recently, require prevailing wage for all of the folks working on these projects. And then in community engagement, this program is really unique in that it created an advisory committee that includes stakeholders from across the spectrum, from subscribers to community-based organizations, developers, and utilities, to participate in a regular forum to propose improvements to the program. So a really strong example of doing this work extraordinarily well. We just want to recognize the incredible work of the Illinois Solar for All program. We also want to spotlight the Overcoming Solar Barriers for Multifamily Housing project, which was led by Olympia Community Solar. This is a community solar project in Olympia, Washington, that provides over 30% bill savings to all of the residents of an 82-unit apartment building, which provides housing exclusively for families that qualify as low income. In a very unique way, Olympia Community Solar partnered with South Sound Solar and developed a proposal that worked with an interconnection solution that got around some of the trickier regulations within the state around community solar and virtual net metering. They also received a grant from the Washington Department of Commerce Low-Income Community Solar Deployment Program to cover the project's costs. This project serves 100% low-income subscribers and is able to provide an average household savings of $282 per resident. Before beginning this engagement too, the Olympia Community Solar team invited all of the residents of this building to participate in a survey and had an overwhelmingly positive response from over 82% of the tenant population supporting the community solar, and has continued that deep community engagement with this community. So again, really excited to recognize this really innovative project. The next project we want to spotlight is the Solar Congregation at Beth Elohim. This is a project that actually comprises 3 solar canopies built on a synagogue in Acton, Massachusetts. This project is owned and developed by Sunwealth Power, and also they manage the canopies on an ongoing basis. And it delivers 50% of the energy generated by these projects to 16 low and moderate income household subscribers in the community. And the other 50% goes to the congregation. This provides the congregation an annual lease payment for their land, and of course provides savings to those households. Subscribers in this project are a part of Sunwealth's broader low-income community solar program, which has no upfront costs to join, no penalties for canceling, and no credit checks required to subscribe. It's able to provide at least a 25% discount on all of the clean energy credits received to these subscribers. And the project so far has aggregated about $6,000 in clean energy savings and is estimated to have a lifetime savings of over $200,000 across all of its subscribers. The next one we want to spotlight is a project called the Prologis Community Solar Project, developed by Solar Landscape. This is on top of a warehouse in New Jersey, and it provides bill savings to over 400 low and moderate income households nearby, and then also provides workforce development opportunities for the local community. So because this project is a part of the New Jersey Community Solar pilot program, it's required to serve at least 51% low and moderate income households. It currently exceeds that requirement. And it has also participated in educating over 1,600 students and community members about careers in green energy. Solar Landscape has also dedicated a lot of effort to working with local grassroots educators and community-based organizations to help engage households in this community solar project. And then last but not least, we also want to spotlight the Staying Sunny in Colorado program, which was led by Xcel Energy. This program is a investor-owned utility-run program, community solar program that supports over 6 megawatts of community solar that is entirely dedicated to low-income households. They provide those low-income households over 30% in bill savings. Sometimes they're able to increase that to 40 or 50% savings. And it's the first 100% income qualified community solar projects that are operated by an investor-owned utility. The subscribers to Xcel Community Solar projects, again, receive 30 to 40% bill savings. So again, want to give a little bit of an idea of the great work that's already happening out there. We are going to be posting case studies of each of these Sunny Awards winners on our Sunny Awards webpage in the coming weeks. So if you want to learn more about how different projects are maximizing benefits and really innovating, please check those out. For now, let's go to the next slide though. So I also want to recognize in terms of case studies, we ran a really great webinar series last summer that featured lessons learned from the 2022 Sunny Awards winners, so the ones that we announced last year. If you are interested in really digging in on any of the meaningful benefits that NCSP champions, we encourage you to go watch the recordings of the webinar or look at the other webinar materials. And again, really learn how other projects and programs are deploying these benefits and maximizing the impacts that they have in communities. Next slide. We're not stopping there. So we've talked a little bit about this in a couple of our sessions, but NCSP is really dedicated to continuing to support you to, one, achieve that target that we were challenged to achieve by Jeff Meridian this morning, but also ensure that these benefits, these meaningful benefits, can be delivered at scale. So I just want to highlight once more a couple of opportunities that we have for you to get engaged more deeply in these efforts and really support your own work on community solar. So we'll go to the next slide. You have heard about this a couple of times today. We announced the lead organizations for these communities of practice this morning, but I want to spend a little time talking about your opportunity to get engaged in these communities of practice moving forward. As Nicole mentioned, these are going to be 5 communities of practice that meet over the next 6 months to dig more deeply into each of these meaningful benefits areas, identify best practices and resources that already exist, and then identify where there are gaps in those resources that we might need to be able to deliver this benefit at scale across all community solar projects. There will be multiple stakeholder convenings, and then at the end, there'll be recommendations for opportunities to scale each of these benefits. If you are interested in participating in one of these communities of practice, next slide, please, you now have an opportunity to join one of our lead organizations. Move to the next slide, please, Sarah. To join one of our communities of practice as either a core team member or join one of the open convenings. So if you are interested in digging deeper on any of these topics, there's an interest form that you can fill out to indicate your interest, and we will respond back to you with some more opportunities to get engaged. But just as a reminder, these are the organizations that are going to be championing these conversations and the resources created, and we hope that you'll consider being a part of those conversations as well. Next slide. So I think this is my last but not least slide. We also really encourage everyone to fill out the request for information that we released last month. And this is to help the federal government better understand the best practices and opportunities that we have to support the successful deployment of solar programs, solar and storage programs that serve low-income and disadvantaged communities. So this is across the board. How do we best ensure that these programs that are being launched by the federal government are being stood up by state governments that they provide benefits that actually reach households. So if you have thoughts on that, please respond to the RFI. Responses are due by 5 p.m. next Friday, February 23rd. Okay, I think I have just one more slide. Great. We are going to share these slides afterwards. So you will get all of these links in addition to the great links that Ariel has been dropping in the chat all day. But there are many, many ways to stay engaged with the National Community Solar Partnership. Join the partnership, become a target partner, commit to helping us meet that 2025 target, complete the interest form for the communities of practice, respond to the RFI, or join one of our upcoming events, including a follow-up webinar on the technical potential analysis or the distribution grid impacts of community solar study that we featured right at the beginning of today's session. And stay tuned for a broader update on what NCSP has been up to in the last year and its impacts that'll be coming in spring 2024. Without further ado, though, I would like to move us into our closing session today, which will be our topic area deep dives. In just a moment, we are going to open up a couple of breakout rooms that we encourage you to jump into. But before we do, since I know not everyone is going to be able to participate in those breakout rooms, first want to close out the main part of this session with a huge thank you to our panelists, our speakers, our moderators for all of their work today and all of the great insights they shared. I also want to send a big thank you to the National Community Solar Partnership team, and especially to our team from the National Renewable Energy Labs who have been working the technology behind this. It is no small feat to run an event of this size and of this complexity. So thank you to all those team members. And then finally, thank you to all of you. I'm going to continue the Valentine's Day references, but this is a long-term relationship for us. We have deleted Hinge. We've made it official, and we want to continue to be your Valentine and work alongside you to reach our target and beyond. Thank you for partnering with us. Your partnership is essential to this work. If you are able to partner a little bit longer and stick with us, we'll be moving now into our deep dive sessions with our panelists. As I mentioned earlier, these sessions are meant to be a more informal way to connect with our panelists, our speakers, and a couple of other guest speakers that are joining us just for these deep dive conversations, asking more specific questions about your work and your project, and then networking with other attendees of the event. So we invite you to join any one of the 4 deep dive conversations and know that you will have the option to join others. So if you are in one and you would like to leave and join a different conversation, you will have the ability to move yourself between those conversations throughout this session. We're going to leave these breakout rooms open until about 4 o'clock. You're welcome to stay on that long or really stay on until your question is answered. We have quite a few folks still on the line, so please know that these conversations will be moderated by some room hosts that'll make sure that we're able to get to as many questions as possible. So for now, thank you once again. We will open up these breakout rooms, encourage you to join, and we'll close out the main session here. So thank you once again, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the coming year.